Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the City Council meeting of June the 18th, 2018. And may I ask Richard Settles to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Everyone, please rise. Place your right hand over your heart. Follow along with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated.
Thank you, Richard. Yvonne, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Councilmember Heilman.
Here.
Councilmember Horvath.
Here.
Councilmember Meister.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem D'Amico.
Yes.
Mayor Duran.
Yes.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First, move to approval of tonight's agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda from staff? No changes from staff? Okay. Any of my council colleagues wish to make any amendments to the agenda? Lindsay Horvath.
I would like to see if this council would be willing to table items 2U and 2V. 2U, we haven't had a formal evaluation of whether R1 design guidelines have actually worked, and it affects less than 1% of the properties in the city. I think taking a little bit of time to make sure that's right might be helpful. And we also, on item 2V, have the census coming up in 2020, and so it would save us $500,000 in study fees to make sure that when we do them,
All right, let me
we
start
have the
with
most information.
2U. Is there a second to table 2U?
Yes.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to table. Item 2U, all those in favor of tabling, please indicate with an aye.
Aye.
Any opposed with a nay? Motion passes 4-1, noting Mayor Pro Tem D'Amico's no vote on the table. Item 2V is a community study. Is there a second to table item 2V?
Yes.
It's been moved and seconded to table item 2V. All those in favor, please indicate with an aye.
Discussion?
Yes, sir.
I just had a question. Is this to table indefinitely or to table to a time certain?
Well, we have the 2020 census coming up. That would cover a lot of what's incorporated in what we're trying to study. So I just wasn't feeling like we needed this study at this time.
I don't think the census won't give us the information we really need for social services funding. It will give us demographic information, but that's a very limited snapshot of what we need.
We can pull it for discussion if you'd like.
Yeah.
All right, why don't we pull 2V then for discussion? We've tabled 2U. Anything else, Councilmember Horvath? No, Councilmember Meister?
Well, I would love to put 5A, which is Environmental Impact Report Review, and 5B, Consideration for Innovative Parking Meter Programs on consent.
I would oppose that.
Is that both 5A and B, Councilmember Heilman? Yes, okay. Okay, so we'll not be putting 5A or B on consent. Any changes, gentlemen, to my left to the agenda? No. Okay. Then a motion to approve the agenda as amended would be in order. Is there such a motion? Is there a second? Moved by Horvath, second by D'Amico. All those in favor, please push your ayes. Agenda is approved 5-0 as amended. Okay, now we'll move to adjournment motions. Let's start, I guess, with Councilmember Heilman this week. Councilmember Heilman, any adjournment motions?
Yes, I would request that we adjourn in memory of Jack Melman. He died recently at the age of 96. He worked for 36 years as an engineer with the LA Department of Water and Power. He was the father of David Eichmann's partner, Richard Melman. I'd request that we adjourn in his memory.
Thank you. Councilmember Horvath? Councilmember Meister? Mayor Pro Tem D'Amico? I have one. I'm going to ask that we adjourn in memory of Suzanne Dietrich. Suzanne served on the Disabilities Advisory Board from June 1999 through June of 2017, including many rotations as chair of the Disabilities Advisory Board during her tenure. Some of her priorities included breast cancer awareness, support of animals in transit services, She assisted with a DAB successful application for a $20,000 National Organization on Disabilities Award to the West Hollywood Library to enhance accessibility for people with disabilities. She was a very active and engaged community member. I think all 5 council members up here knew her, and she will be missed by the DAB, the city staff, and many others in West Hollywood. Without objection, we'll adjourn in those names. That moves us to presentations. Looks like we've got a few. Councilmember Horvath, would you like to start with Ms. Buckles?
I'm happy to. Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, I have the honor and pleasure of presenting a plaque for her service to Maggie Buckles, who has been an outstanding commissioner. She started as a public facilities commissioner and completed her service as a rent stabilization commissioner. She only completed her service because she moved out of the city, and she posted a very moving statement when she purchased her house, unfortunately, outside of West Hollywood. But as a young adult woman, an executive, an independent woman, purchasing her own house, the importance of what that meant to her, I thought that it was a very moving and empowering story that she shared, but all the while being a gladiator for us renters as a rent stabilization commissioner and working as an advocate in the community on so many important issues. So we wish her the best of luck and all the success in her career, and wherever it takes her. We congratulate you on your new home purchase and hope that you'll always consider West Hollywood your second home. Thanks, Maggie. Come on up.
Thank you so much for this. I lived in West Hollywood for the better part of a decade. I still think of it as my home as I was driving back here today. I was so happy to be back. I miss it. I miss all of you. Some of the best people that I met were people that I met through my work here. I have nothing but love and admiration for the people of this city and for its progressive policies. So thank you again.
Thank you, Commissioner Buckles, for your service to the city. Thank you. Next presentation, Councilmember Meister.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Is William Dobler here? It's my pleasure to present this plaque in appreciation for his service, William Dobler's service on the Transportation Commission, although I'm very sorry that he has conflicts with teaching Italian language, literature, and history, and cannot continue on with the meetings because he has just been a fantastic asset. I've known Williams ever since I moved into West Hollywood West, and his planning background has just been a great asset to the commission, and I hope that he can change his schedule at some point so that he'll be able to be on a commission in the future. So if William will come up, I'd like to present this. Thank you.
Members of the council, I just want to say, as a 24-year resident of West Hollywood, the city of West Hollywood, it has been an honor for the past 3 years to serve on the Transportation Commission. And as a number of you know, I've worked with a number of you over the years, and I look forward, my husband and I look forward to actually retiring in West Hollywood, and both continuing to remain involved in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Dobler, for your service to the community. Finally, we have a presentation for Victory in Europe Day. Every year, the City of West Hollywood and the Russian Advisory Board host an event to commemorate Victory in Europe Day, which marks Germany's surrender to the Soviet Union in 1945 and the end of the Nazi regime. This year, there were 2 organizations that volunteered their time and resources for the event, so we wanted to give them a special acknowledgement tonight. First, One World Tours Company provided 2 free buses for veterans of the Red Army to ride during the Immortal Regiment March. The bus drivers also assisted the veterans and their families during the march. So Stuart Gruber and his partners are here to receive the proclamation. And secondly, Russian Television Network is a Russian language television service. They're a very important communication link between the City of West Hollywood and our many Russian-speaking community members. And they promoted the Victory in Europe Day event for free, and Mr. Steve Berger is here to receive that proclamation tonight. I'd like to thank all of you for your contributions to Victory in Europe Day, and if my colleagues would like to join for the presentation, please join me. Are you here, Mr. Berger and Mr. Gruber? Yes, you're here. Thank you.
All right, first I'd like to say I'm happy that the right side won the war, obviously. And this has actually been a big couple of months for us. My associates Walter and Anastasia have actually moved on from One World Tours. Walter, finally, it's taken a while, finally got his own tour business going on, 360 Tours. So let's put it together for him. This was a long time coming. We're super proud of him for that. And me personally, I actually just joined Local 399, so I'm going to be in another part of the transportation business. So it's a pretty exciting year, upcoming year for us all. So I'm really happy about that, but hope to be back next year doing the same thing. It's really good to have these celebrations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to thank you, City of West Hollywood, being a Russian in the Russian community here. It's a pleasure, and thank you for everything that you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now move to 20 minutes of public comment. Council values your public comments. However, Council cannot take action on items not listed on tonight's posted agenda. We will start by having comments on items that are on the consent calendar first before we move to general public comment. The first speaker is John Erickson, to be followed by Steve Martin.
Hello, council members, Mayor Duran. My name is John Erickson. I'm the president of the Hollywood chapter of the National Organization for Women. Also on the California Commission for the Status of Women and Girls. Yes, I'm the only man. Thank you very much. We all have to be in this work together, which is why I'm so thankful for your support on items 2GG and 2HH. Specifically, 2HH is an issue very close to the chapter's heart. We are working to make sure that California's backlog of approximately 13,615 untested rape kits get tested through this legislation. So what you're doing tonight is an important action in the coalition that we've built with a number of grassroots organizations across Southern California to make sure that these bills pass, get signed by the governor, and victims that have been waiting for justice actually get to see their day in court and have their assailants actually held accountable for their actions. In addition, for 2GG, the Trump administration, among many of the monstrosities that they seem to keep doing, the attack to Title X is an assault on the basic rights of individuals from all walks of life. And this gag rule would prevent medical providers from actually talking to about safe and legal abortion to their patients. And we just want to thank you again for joining in this coalition. We need to stop and prevent anything that we can do at this point to stop this fascist regime from continuing its assault on everyone that we hold dear here in the city and elsewhere. So I just want to thank you. I want to thank Councilmember Horvath and Councilmember Heilman for bringing these two items forward. And please let the chapter or the commission know on how we could ever be of assistance. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Steve Martin, to be followed by Elizabeth Ramirez.
Yeah, Steve Martin, West Hollywood, and I certainly want to thank Councilmember Horvath and Councilmember Heilman for 2GG and join in what John just finished saying. It's really important. We have a long tradition of being a pro-choice city, and this administration and the Republicans in general have put so many roadblocks and so many attempts to block access to women to legal abortions, which is really sad. And I also wanted to speak out about my concerns about 2D. I joined Councilmember Meister in her concerns about using specific plans in ways that are essentially spot zoning. And, I certainly appreciate the design of this new project. I certainly appreciate Jason Lulian and Nate Goler's contribution to this community, but I really think that this project's going forward hand in hand with a specific plan was not the way specific plans are supposed to work. I don't think this is the way the general plan is supposed to work, and I just don't think this was well thought out. I will now change subjects in risk arrest. I was very concerned at the last council meeting how the mayor engaged in an argument with Ivy Bottini over her right to address you, the city council, and called up the sheriff's department to curtail that right. And it just came across as very heavy-handed and unnecessary, disrespectful, particularly coming from someone who aspires to be a civil rights attorney. And, I think there's ongoing concerns about this Stormy Daniels presentation. I think it appears that this was a gift of public funds. It did not appear to benefit the city of West Hollywood in any way. And it just seemed to be benefiting Ms. Daniels and her sleazeball attorney. And I just am very disappointed about how this all has come down. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth Ramirez, to be followed by Amanda Goodwin.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Elizabeth Ramirez. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Athens Services. Just wanted to say a couple comments this evening. One, I wanted to congratulate the Chamber of Commerce and the city for a great State of the City event. Had a great time, and it's always fun to learn about the state of a community with a fun environment. So kudos to the team for that. Also wanted to congratulate the city and Christopher Street West on a successful Pride event. Athens Services is honored to be a proud partner, and Ruben here in the audience, our route supervisor, works tirelessly with the team to make sure the streets are cleaned at the end of each night in preparation for the next day's festivities. So just wanted to say thank you for a great event, and we look forward to next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda Goodwin, to be followed by John Allendorfer.
Hello, Amanda Goodwin, West Hollywood. First, I want to congratulate you for a great event, Pride, but there was a few little glitches with the oversale and a little bit of riotous activity around Westbourne. And I also noticed, I felt too early that the sheriff's department kind of disappeared later at night when the parade ended, and there were still so many people in the city. I just didn't think that was very wise. I contacted the city yesterday, some of you know, about the sidewalks being just deplorable, and Helen assured me that they're going to be cleaned up around the PDC, and I think if we're going to engage Charles Cohen, we should respect the PDC a little bit more and not leave it looking like a disaster after an event. We should leave the city as we found it after Pride. And I also, John, you had an idea like a year and a half ago about really addressing the sidewalks in the city, and I think that's a great idea. I was talking to some businesses around Santa Monica and Robertson that have been complaining about vomit, urine, all sorts of things, and I think we see that all over the city. Also, I want to thank you for passing Robertson Lane. I think it's going to be a jewel for West Hollywood, and I'm really excited about the project. And lastly, Mayor, I think you owe Ivy an apology. I really do, because everybody that came after her spoke about the same thing, and you didn't treat them the same way. And I just, I get it. You get beat up a lot, and it doesn't seem fair at times, but she is an amazing icon, and I just think it would be an amazing gesture to just kind of bury that and put that to rest. Thank you.
Thank you. John Allendorfer, to be followed by Karen Ayers.
Good evening, Mayor Duran and council members. John Allendorfer, resident of West Hollywood. As chairperson of the Senior Advisory Board, I want to give a shout out to the viewing public out there about our Senior in Action program. And I first want to thank the City of West Hollywood in conjunction with the city's Senior Advisory Board, which kicked off the new program called Seniors in Action, which is community plus connection plus conversation, a monthly gathering for adults 55 and over. The first Seniors in Action, it was a big success. It featured a program where we viewed a TED Talk, Let's End Ageism. It was followed by sharing/discussion and a dynamic creative project. It was a great afternoon, and the room was abuzz with some of our active community members, as well as a number of folks who were new to participating in West Hollywood programs for the first time. We hope to bring in more community members from West Hollywood, the seniors 55 and plus, and the surrounding area. And we hope you'll join us at the next Seniors in Action, which is June 26th, next Tuesday, at the West Hollywood Library in the community meeting room at 2 o'clock to 3:30. The event will be similar to the format that was done in May, but we're going to have a different topic and activities associated with the topic. We're going to keep the topic activities a surprise, but we think our next topic will be lots of fun, as well as energizing, creative, and thought-provoking. This is a chance for seniors 55 and over. Come over to the west side. There's something for you. So join us next Tuesday, the 26th, at 2 o'clock, upstairs.
Thank you. Karen Ayers, to be followed by Stephanie Harker.
Good evening, Mayor Duran and council members. I'm here as a private citizen tonight, but I am chair of the Women's Advisory Board, and I want to thank you for items 2GG and 2HH. And John spoke a lot about 2GG, so I'll just say a few words about 2HH. The Trump administration, I'm sorry, vice versa. I'll talk about 2GG. The Trump administration's proposed changes to Title X funding is a direct attack on Planned Parenthood, one in a series of attacks from the administration, and this resolution opposing it is very much needed. We have a Planned Parenthood here in West Hollywood, which I'm proud of. And, as many people know, Planned Parenthood isn't just there to perform abortions. It's there to provide health care, and not just for women, but for men as well. And they tend to really cater to the communities they serve, just as the Planned Parenthood in West Hollywood does cater to its community here. Just personally, I mentor a foster youth who has impregnated a girl, and this is something that's very common in LA County. A disproportionate amount of foster youth become parents when they're kids. It's kids having kids. He's 17 years old, she's 17 years old, and they need family planning. They need health care services. Sometimes they need reproductive care services, and Planned Parenthood needs to be protected for the most vulnerable people like them. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie Harker, to be followed by Richard Kraft.
Good evening. Stephanie Harker, City of West Hollywood. I know that everyone in this room and those watching are aware of what is going on along our country's southern border. I'm going to try to get through this. Many of us do not know what we can do to quickly end state-sanctioned child abuse in this horrendous form of separating innocent children from their parents. It is one of the darkest periods of this country. I implore everyone to do what they can to stop this. And to start, there was announced today by Representative Pramila Jayapal of Washington that there will be a mass mobilization on June 30th at 11 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time. I'm hoping that Los Angeles will follow suit and that everyone can participate, as well as West Hollywood, to try and reverse this horrendous thing that's going on. The other thing I think we can do is to look ahead to November and to get out the vote as usual. That's always important, but we need to take back the House before more of this goes on. The congressional districts in Los Angeles, or in California, 7 of them, California can provide 1/3 of the seats needed to take back the House, flip from red to blue. I hope everybody will jot these down. These are the districts, and you need to be calling them as often as you can. 10th District, 21st District, 25th, 39th, 45, 48, and 49. If we don't do something now, there's no return from what this country is becoming. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Kraft, be followed by Ivy Bottini.
Good evening. My name is Richard Kraft. I'm a West Hollywood resident. I want to share with the council my experience voting in the recent primary election. Due to the consolidation of neighborhood polling precincts into one central location, I, like many residents, arrived to vote at the West Hollywood Auditorium for the first time. I found the parking and access to be difficult. Due to that weekend's Pride event, most spaces in the parking structure were marked with "Do Not Park" signs. The walk from the parking structure to the auditorium is long for some. I observed one elderly couple, sample ballots in hand, slowly making the trek, but it was clearly not easy for them. I eventually found a few spaces in a loading zone along Santa Monica Boulevard set aside for voters, but the signage was small and easy to miss. I asked the council to consider how to make it easier for residents to cast their vote in the West Hollywood Auditorium. I have a few suggestions. Perhaps there are other ideas that could be implemented as well. 1, expand the area directly in front of the auditorium to allow more spaces for voter parking and provide better signage to alert voters that these spaces are available. 2, reserve spaces on the ground floor of the parking structure for voter parking so voters won't have to park on higher levels and deal with elevators or stairs. 3, provide a cart shuttle from the parking structure to the auditorium to help the elderly and disabled. 4, station helpers both in the parking structure and on the curb outside to point unfamiliar voters in the direction of the auditorium or to inform them of the option that is available for curbside voting. Many residents are used to voting in a community room or church just blocks from their home. Having to now navigate to a central location that involves finding parking and walking can be daunting. I want to encourage our city to take steps to make sure that voting is as easy as possible in West Hollywood and that nobody's vote is lost because of the difficulty of getting to the polling place. We must make certain that the voices of our residents are heard in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Ivy Bottini, to be followed by Robin Connerly and Carl Lott.
Good evening, Council. Ivy Bottini, resident almost 18 years. I called the clerk's office earlier in the week because I wanted to find out what the requirements are to get a city proclamation, especially one that this is not about you, John, wherever you are, Mayor. I can't see. What I was told was that our mayor went directly to communications and communications legislative. I then spoke to Paul Aravallo's office and asked the question, did you know he was going to do that? And because of it being a keys to the city, not a personal proclamation. And the message was, no, he could do that on his own. And then I found out that the mayor was the only one that went to get that proclamation. But the interesting thing, all the signatures of the council people were on the proclamation. And then I found out that they were stamped on there. And then I found out that Lindsay didn't know anything about it, that Lauren didn't know anything about it, Ty Mecca received individual emails after he asked the question, you know, were they in favor? And they didn't know about it. Is that my bell?
Yes, it is.
It's weird sounding. Okay, anyway, the system is weird. It can't do that, you know, if you're giving it, you know, like Lindsay gives a proclamation as Lindsay, it's from her personally. But when it involves the city, like this one did, no, something's got to change with that system of how awards are given, and especially since some of them don't even know it was going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Robin Connerly and Carl Lott, to be followed by Kathy Blavis.
First of all, I want to thank you for adjourning in Suzanne Dietrich's memory. She was a longtime resident of one of our buildings, and she will be greatly missed. She was an asset to the city and an asset to us, and we will miss her. As you know, I will be retiring in a couple of weeks, and I wanted to let you know how much I appreciate the city of West Hollywood and everything that you've done for our corporation. I want to thank you for our annual contracts, which keep coming, being renewed like clockwork, and we really appreciate your support. I think even more importantly, the city has been steadfast in funding our buildings, and they fund the riskiest money. It's the acquisition and pre-development money that we need to buy our projects and to leverage money from other sources. And so I wanted to let you know how much we appreciate that. During my 11 years, because of your support, we've built 5 new buildings, 221 units, and we've housed 300 new people. And so I have to be very grateful to the city for making that happen. And I also want to give a special thank you to John Heilman. John, 32 years ago, you were a major force in starting the corporation. We consider you the father of WHCHC. Without you, it wouldn't have happened. And I hope you are as proud of your legacy as I am to have served as its guardian. Thank you very much. And I'd like to introduce you to Carl Lott, who is our board chair.
Hi, I am Carl Lott. I'm a resident of the city of West Hollywood, and I'm just still, I don't believe that she's retiring, but I only have a few seconds left here. I just wanted to announce that after a full national search, we do have a new CEO who will be starting next month, and that's Jesse Slansky, who is our current Director of Real Estate, and we're very excited to have him. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Happy Father's Day, John Heilman. Kathy Blavis, to be followed by Esteban Montemayor.
Kathy Blavis, City of West Hollywood. Good evening. I just wanted to call everyone's attention to next Monday, a week from tonight, June 25th, Historic Preservation. The annual event will be held at Fiesta Hall. That's 1200 North Vista Street. And the subject this year, the celebration is Eclectic WeHo. And we hope people will come and join the Historic Preservation Commission. We're celebrating diversity in architecture. So there'll be a reception and a program, and to be followed by a walking tour. It's always nice to have people to come out to these things. It should be a good event, and I'm hoping everyone can come. And also, sort of on a personal note, if there's any foodies out there, I would like to suggest everyone actually this Sunday, the 24th, 11 a.m. on the Food Network. I'm going to be a proud auntie and tell you that my niece, Molly Ye, will have her first show on the Food Network called Girl Meets Farm. So if anyone enjoys cooking or just watching someone who has fun cooking, please tune in. Thank you.
Thank you. Esteban Montemayor, to be followed by Victor Olmanchenko, who will be our final speaker.
Good evening, Esteban Montemayor, resident of West Hollywood and board president of Christopher Street West, LA Pride. I just wanted to come and thank the City of West Hollywood, the City Council, the City Manager's Office, special events staff, public safety staff, public facilities, of course, our fire and county sheriff, and of course, our residents. This year's Pride theme was Just Be. Just Be was our call for everyone to come join us at the parade and the festival and be their authentic self and be exactly who they are. There's been a lot of negativity lately in the world, and I think a lot of people were hungry for a positive message and a welcoming environment. And if you didn't notice, Pride was well attended that weekend, maybe too well attended. But it was the first time in CSW's history that we had reached capacity at the festival and that we sold out the event. And I want to apologize to the residents of West Hollywood for the negative impacts that had on their neighborhoods. That was not our intention, and we are seeking to rectify that for next year. And we are going to work with the city staff and with public safety professionals to ensure that next year is safe. When you put on a large-scale event, public safety is always the priority for anything, and so that is our priority. And I truly want to thank the county fire and sheriff's departments for all of their work. They acted so quickly, and they were just world-class public safety professionals. And we're just so glad that they were there by our side to make sure everyone was safe, especially on Saturday night. We're going to work with city staff, as I said, to figure out how to best utilize our space. We are trying to fit in so many different aspects of Pride and the festival into, a wonderful park that's going to expand over the next few years, and we're going to have even more space. But we're going to meet with the community. We're going to go on a listening tour. Madonna and I, our executive director, to figure out what those priorities are. So you can email me at Esteban, my first name, and my last initial M, at lapride.org and learn more. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Esteban. Thank you to you and your board for all your hard work. I think of all the years of CSW presidents, this is the first time a West Hollywood resident has served as president, so congratulations on your recent appointment. Victor Olmanchenko, you're rounding up the session.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Victor Olmanchenko, longtime resident of West Hollywood, and I believe that item 2K could not come quicker. That's the agreement for services on the consent calendar that you have with the company Urban Math to assess feasibility of pilot programs for affordability in the housing market. Having worked with attorney Maggie Buckles on the Public Facilities Commission for 2 years before she left for rent stabilization, it's nice to hear that she's bought a home, but she's bought it outside of West Hollywood. Maybe this study can provide us with some information that would be helpful for making housing more affordable here. Regarding 2U, the R1, which you've tabled for consideration at a later date, there are these 5 neighborhoods that could join the Norma Triangle in West Hollywood West in terms of having design guidelines. But as I'm learning as time goes on, you gotta have it coming up from the grassroots. So it will be interesting to see what the results are of the design guidelines program, if there is a kind of monitoring program in place for what the design guidelines have been able to do in Norma Triangle and West Hollywood West before we go on to the other 5 neighborhoods. I'm just puzzled by the number 17 million in item 2X on our transportation thing. Maybe that can be explained a little bit later. It just seemed to pop out from nowhere. And regarding 2Y, the extension for 5 more years of a 10-month current contract to the host compliance company to track the usage and to see that people are following the rules that you have passed for the Airbnbs. This host compliance company is getting the contract. It'll be interesting to see reports come out from time to time as to what they have found out. And regarding the continuing Stormy Daniels issue, I think maybe, Mayor, you overreacted with calling the sheriff, but the more important thing is let's go forward and let's develop some kind of process. We're such a process city. We have a process for the Rainbow Key Awards. We should have a process also for how city proclamations are issued that are then signed by all 5 of you. It's important to keep the process going. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment for the evening. We'll now begin with council member comments. I think this week I'll start to my left instead of my right. Councilmember Heilman, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. I have just a couple of quick comments. I want to thank the public and the business community for accommodating LA Pride. As Estevan said, it was a very well-attended event, and that presented its own set of challenges. I also want to second the thank you to the sheriffs and the fire department and all of our staff. It was really a wonderful weekend. If you were out at the parade or at the festival, there were a lot of people, and the attendees were very young, and many of them probably don't have a safe place in their own community. So it was really great to be able to host all of these people in the city and allow them to experience a wonderful and affirming place for young LGBT people. I also want to thank all of our staff who have been working tirelessly on our budget. Later tonight, we will be dealing with the budget and hopefully adopting it tonight. But our staff really spends probably 6 months of the year pulling together all of the material, the supporting documentation, and it really is an incredible effort, and I want to thank them publicly for all of their hard work. I see Hank Scott is back with us after a brief health scare. Thank you for being with us tonight and welcome back. And Robin, we have to come up with an appropriate way to recognize you for your incredible service to the Housing Corporation. Thank you for your kind remarks. I also want to give a shout out to our former colleague from many years ago. Many people here probably don't remember Helen Albert, but she too was instrumental in starting the Housing Corporation, and if it weren't for her, I don't think we would have moved forward with it. Robin, you came into the Housing Corporation at a time when there were lots of challenges. You helped stabilize the organization. You helped reach out and communicate effectively with the residents. You've really done a remarkable job in addition to the additional affordable units you've developed in the city. So thank you so much. And I've already made a note that you may be retired, but we're going to drag you back and find a way to recognize your incredible service to our community. And then finally, Mr. Kraft spoke about some of the challenges with the election. Of course, some of it is because our parking is limited right now due to construction. But I thought his suggestions were certainly good ones. I know this election was run by the county, but I see Yvonne shaking her head, and undoubtedly you've made notes of some of those suggestions. They were quite good. I was one of the people who came in and they couldn't find my name on the rolls, which was a little bit upsetting. And clearly the county had a number of issues with how they printed out the names, the order in which they were printed. Eventually we were able to find my name, but it was listed in a very strange and non-alphabetical and non-numeric way. So hopefully you can convey those concerns to the county as well. And those are my comments for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Meister.
Thank you, Mayor. So first, I wanted to report that I was at the Southern California Association of Governments Joint Committee's policy meeting, where there were presentations on transportation, housing, and economic development. I also attended Pride on Saturday, and I think it's sort of a good news, bad news. The good news is it was packed and people wanting to be there. And as Councilmember Heilman mentioned, a lot of young people, and that's really gives me a lot of hope. And hopefully we can work out the logistical issues so that next year everybody who planned on getting in can get in. Regarding the consent calendar, I want to note my no vote on item 2D, Robertson Lane, and on item 2E, I just wanted to ask on the Commission and Advisory Board meeting synopsis about the ad hoc committees. Maybe the city manager can say something in his comments. In the report, it said that all ad hoc committees must be approved by City Council, and I'm not sure that that's the case, so I just want to make sure about that. Let's see. Item 2J on the West Hollywood Community Housing Corp contract. I just wanted to suggest in the scope that maybe we add one town hall meeting per year with their residents. Also want to talk about the possibility of training of staff and board members, the sensitivity training and also development training that we provide some of our social service providers, and they might find that to be beneficial. And also would like to add that they actively engage with regional agencies like the West Side Cities COG. I think that would be good for them and for the COG.
Councilmember, are you asking to pull that from consent for further discussion?
Well, if there's a need for discussion.
Colleagues,
I don't object to anything you asked for.
any concerns with the three issues that were raised by Councilmember Meister?
I'm not sure, are you adding all of those to the Housing Corporation contract?
Well, the three things that I'm suggesting for their scope of what they provide. And again, one is to actively engage with regional agencies like the West Side Cities COG, which I think will be beneficial to the COG and to them. A development training of staff and board members like we provide for our social service providers. Actually, that wouldn't be added to their scope, but that would be something for us to consider, and maybe that's part of the budget discussion.
I think I'm going to pull the item for discussion, because it sounds like we're getting into the merits now. So I'll pull it
Okay.
for discussion, 2J.
All right. And let's see. On item 2L, the agreement for services with the housing workshop, I would also like to ask if they can look at residential land value as they look at the in lieu fees as well. So to include the value of residential land, since sometimes we are in development utilizing residential land for non-residential purposes, so that might be something we need to look at when we're looking at in lieu fees.
Any colleague have any objection to that amendment or wish to have this item pulled for discussion? Seeing none, okay.
Okay. And we've pulled 2U, which I really appreciate, because I do have concerns about how the design guidelines are working in West Hollywood West, and in fact went on a walkabout with staff, and I think they're in agreement that there needs to be some additional work done, and maybe we need to do that before it hits prime time for any other neighborhoods. And then 2V has been pulled, so I'll hold that. Item 2Y, host compliance. I just wanted to ask the city manager if maybe he could tell us when we can expect an update on how it's going with host compliance. And then regarding item 2AA, the amendment to the agreement with Amanda Foundation, I just wanted to mention that I seem to remember there were issues with their website or our website, and if someone lost a dog, there was nothing on their website, I believe, that showed this relationship with the city of West Hollywood. So if we can just make sure that is happening. As far as, let's see, we have to remember that One City, One Pride is still going on, even though the Pride weekend is over. So we have June 19th, Celebration Theater presents the Chuck Rowland Award to Billy Porter. June 20th, screening of When Bet Met May, about the first meeting of Betty Davis and Mae West at a dinner party in West Hollywood. June 22nd to 23rd, New Stages presents Heroic Lives. June 24th, Summer Sounds Concert with the world's only LGBTQ mariachi. June 30th, Trans Life LA Pop-Up Film Festival. And you can get more information on the city's website. And then I just want to also reiterate about historic preservation event. Thank you, Kathy Blavis, for bringing it up. Eclectic WeHo. The annual celebration is Monday, June 25th, 6 to 8, starting at Fiesta Hall at 1200 North Vista Street. And we'll be celebrating the diverse architecture that makes our city so eclectic. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Horvath.
Thank you, Mayor. I first want to also thank everyone who participated, supported, and made possible this year's CSW LA Pride events here in West Hollywood. The remarks were well taken. I think it's clear that the leadership of the organization is open to conversation about how to improve for next year. But I think people who did participate this year found the festival, the parade, and surrounding events that have taken place and are yet to come reach a variety of diverse audiences, and I think that there's much to be said about that. But I especially want to thank our staff and the residents who support that effort, and it's really important to our community, so thank you. I also want to thank Robin for your amazing leadership of the West Hollywood Community Housing Corporation. You will certainly be missed. There's not someone who can fill your shoes, but we know that Jesse will step up boldly and ably in this role as the corporation moves forward, but we will certainly miss you and celebrate you in West Hollywood in true West Hollywood fashion. So thank you for your many years of service. I do know that Jesse has committed as the new executive director to hosting an opportunity in the fall, much like what CSW is doing with their new leadership, creating an opportunity in the community to have a conversation about West Hollywood Community Housing Corporation services. So to Councilmember Meister's concern about that, he is already planning to do something like that this coming fall, which is something we can look forward to. On item 2K, regarding housing affordability, if it's okay with my colleagues, I'd like to give additional direction to consider, to review the Santa Monica POD pilot program, which is a subsidy payment program that provides assistance to long-term low-income senior renters. This is money that Santa Monica provides from their general fund to make sure that people can stay in their housing. And I think that there have been circumstances that have come to our attention recently where a pilot program like this might very well serve our community as well. So if we can include that for consideration, I'd appreciate it if there's no objection. With regard to item 2Y, short-term rental enforcement, since host compliance has come on board, they've sent out violation letters, and since that time, listings decreased by about 30%, units available decreased by 25%, and since April alone, they issued 383 letters to property owners about the short-term rental violations that are happening. So host compliance, it seems, has been a very effective resource for us in terms of our enforcement efforts, and I want to thank Code Compliance for continuing their work with them to make sure our rules are followed. I understand the online registration portal is in its final stages and it will imminently debut in the community as well. On item 2O, I want to thank staff for bringing this forward. LA LGBT Center's domestic violence counseling. I learned that 166 new clients were served in 2016 and 207 new clients were served in 2017. Those might sound like alarming statistics, but what it shows is that people are feeling the confidence and support they need to come forward and get the services they need. So I would ask that our public safety team also work with the domestic violence community response team to get activated and respond to this experience of domestic violence in West Hollywood, and maybe we can work on some programs and efforts with them as well. On item 2FF, I just wanted to confirm, I think it was confirmed by staff, that we are not investing in fossil fuels, weapons manufacturing, or any anti-choice groups. At last check, it was confirmed that we are not, and so I just want to make sure, if we are, that we discontinue those investments. But I think we have a record of not doing that. I would be surprised if that has changed. Since the last city council meeting, I represented the city at the LA Chamber Transportation Council, where they unanimously voted to support our efforts to bringing Metro Rail to West Hollywood. I also participated in the Clean Power Alliance Executive Committee meeting and legislator meetings on behalf of the city, represented the city at the California League of Cities Transportation, Communication, and Public Works Committee. I also participated in a press conference with Attorney General Javier Becerra, who fully funded our city's requested grant to help with tobacco prevention efforts for our youth. You'll recall back in 2015, we instituted tobacco retail licenses to prevent businesses from selling tobacco to youth. This was an effort actually led by students here in West Hollywood, and the Attorney General saw the merit in it and invested 100% of what we asked for, so that's really exciting news. I represented the city at the Liability Trust Fund Oversight Committee and Claims Board, where one West Hollywood case was heard. Also participated at the Sanitation District and the National League of Cities Human Development Committee. I also participated in the 8th annual powwow, which took place, and I want to give a special thank you to Michelle Enfield, who's leaving her role at APLA Red Circle Project. Along with Elton Naswood, they brought forward the powwow that happens every year. And so Michelle is going on to bigger and better things, but we thank her for bringing this special event to West Hollywood. Finally, just the last couple comments. The Costa-Hawkins repeal ballot measure did qualify, so it will be on the ballot in the fall. This is something that the City Council supported. I want to thank everyone who volunteered and signed petitions to make this happen. This is an opportunity for us to make our voices heard at the ballot box. I want to wish happy birthday to our city manager, who recently had a birthday, and to Mayor Pro Tem D'Amico, who has an upcoming birthday before our next meeting. And a final bit of good news, AB 2681, the Seismic Resilience Bill, which was sponsored by Assemblymember Adrien Nazarian, passed. This makes the efforts that happened here in West Hollywood law throughout the state of California to make sure that communities are prepared for any potential seismic efforts. They're gathering the data, basically everything we've done in West Hollywood, they're now saying everyone in California should be doing. Which is exciting. I do want to note, though, at a recent Rent Stabilization Commission meeting, that 2 of our commissioners were not able to participate. They had to abstain from participation because they live in buildings that were listed. If that decision remains, that means 2 members of the City Council will not be able to participate in that policy making either. So I know there's some ongoing discussion about who will be able to participate, but I just want to let the members of the public know that happened. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem D'Amico.
Thank you, Mayor. Robin, yes, I wanted to send my congratulations. Also, and we'll be sure to give Jesse all the support he needs to fill your pumps. CSW, Esteban, and your entire team, thank you for your hard work. Chris and Craig and their legacy of several years of their strong and dedicated work as well. I think CSW is on a terrific path, and LA Pride, as it moves in to be I think the future final name of that organization, is also arriving right on time. I wanted to talk just very briefly about item 2U, which is about the agreement for services to study single-family homes. I would ask that this not be tabled for too long. I think there was a very well-written email from the public. Ed wrote some very thoughtful things, but one of the things I'm concerned about is, yes, it may be only 350 homes in a scattered number of neighborhoods, but those homes are worth probably $500 million in value. It is tax dollars that come to our city. We need to protect those neighborhoods and make sure that they remain places that the residents who live there wish to live, and the houses that are there make sense. So I think the West Hollywood West Design Guidelines came along in a time of great upheaval, and almost there was some hurry and rush, and this is a sort of thoughtful attempt to get ahead of that. And I understand that there's some concern that we're regulating, that this is maybe a solution in search of a problem, but I think maybe this is just some thoughtfulness to help maintain some really exciting and terrific neighborhoods so that they can continue to be exciting and terrific. So to my colleagues who voted to table this item and to the staff, I would encourage us to bring this back, if not for a decision, at least for a discussion about what we can do when considering those neighborhoods going forward. And finally, I accepted no donations from anyone with any items on tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I have 3 items I want to talk about tonight, but before I do that, I know Esther Baum is at home watching us on TV. Happy 93rd birthday to Esther Baum. It's her birthday today. Happy birthday, Esther. First, I want to talk about the pink carpet. The Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles is having a concert this weekend called The Pink Carpet. It's a merger of Vito Russo's Celluloid Closet and an exploration of the early portrayal of LGBT people in film, from the first silent movie that depicted a same-sex couple dancing in the 1920s all the way up to Brokeback Mountain. It's going to be a great multimedia event at the Alex Theater in Glendale. I know that the chorus provides free tickets to members of the Senior Advisory Board, the Lesbian Gay Advisory Board, and residents in all of our recovery houses. But I wanted to encourage people, if you're looking for something interesting to do to keep Pride Month going, that the concert this weekend should be worthwhile. And stars Leslie Jordan from Will and Grace, who I think is one of our funniest residents we have here in West Hollywood. Second thing I want to do is I do want to apologize to Ivy Bottini. I think that I was overly heavy-handed with her at the last council meeting, and I apologize sincerely. When I saw that we had 2 hours of speakers signed up for an item, I was in a bit of a panic that we had to get things done, and I just could have handled that differently. So, Ivy, I apologize. I do want to just say that Ivy and I go back a long time. I know Ivy's story, that she founded the National Organization for Women in New York City in the mid-'60s. I was in the 2nd grade when that happened. But I came to LGBT service about 13 years after that, in the late 70s. And so since the late 70s and over the decades, Ivy and I have walked a common path. And she is one of the lesbian women who really took a position of leadership during the No on 64 campaign, when Lyndon LaRouche was attempting to quarantine HIV-positive men in concentration camps. And Ivy was one of those lesbians that stepped up, along with Diane Abbott and Dottie Wine and so many others, and took a position of leadership. And so I'm forever grateful for that. And although we may have our disagreements from time to time, I know that we both have walked a common path. So I just wanted to say that tonight. And finally, I wanted to conclude by following up on the remarks that Stephanie Harker made. I am going to Phoenix on Wednesday. I'm serving as the national chairman of NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected Officials and their first gay chairman. We represent 6,000 Latino electeds all over the United States. And we've just been having a lot of crisis conference calls lately. What is happening along the southern border of the United States is wicked. There's no other word for it. For Donald Trump to try to score a win to get funding for his border wall at the expense of cruelty to children, taking them out of their mother's arms, using them as pawns in a political game, is a form of wickedness and evil. And I am relieved to finally see some religious leaders are beginning to speak out, including the Catholic Conference of Bishops. I think the Pope's just about ready to let him have it. And I urge that, hope that more religious leaders speak out. There's such a thing as trying to establish immigration policy, but to use children as pawns in order to try to score a win without any regard for the hurt that is caused to their mothers, their fathers, and to the children themselves, some who are breastfeeding, is really a form of political cruelty. It's not to say the United States hasn't done something like this before. We certainly did near slavery, the founding of the country, and we certainly did with the internment of Japanese Americans and other Asians during World War II out of fear. And we almost did to HIV-positive gay men in the 1980s. But it's encouraging to me to see people all over the city of West Hollywood, many of whom are not Latino, who are speaking out about the injustice, raging about the injustice. And I think it gives a lot of us hope, whether we're Puertorriqueños, Cubanos, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Mexican Americans, Salvadorians, Hondurans, or any other members of Latino ethnicity, to see other people rally to the defense of our people who are currently identified, I believe, as the other. Certainly LGBT people and members of the Jewish community have historically been identified as the other in American politics. But right now, sadly, it's immigrants, and even more tragically, these are not just mere immigrants, they're refugees trying to escape violence in Honduras and Guatemala and Nicaragua, and to have them reach the southern border only to have their children taken away from them forcefully is really a period of wickedness. So thank you, Ms. Harker, for bringing that to our attention in the rally on June 30th, and I encourage all our residents to speak out and to join the efforts to make sure that this injustice does not go without challenge. And that concludes my comments. And now our city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm going to make an attempt to answer some of the questions that came up tonight. If I miss any, please remind me. Item 2X, the transit services contract, when discussing it tonight, it was mentioned as a 5-year contract. It's actually a 10-year contract, and it has a not-to-exceed amount of $17 million. I'm going to let Yvonne talk about the question regarding the advisory bodies.
Yes, thank you. So that comment in the synopsis was part of a larger conversation that we had. So no, ad hoc subcommittees do not have to be approved by council normally, because ad hoc subcommittees are for a specific item or issue for a specific amount of time, and they can be approved by that body as long as there is less than a majority of the members of that body. And so if there's a women's leadership conference, if 2 or 3 of the women's advisory board members want to form an ad hoc subcommittee to work on that project or program, they're able to do that and approve that at that level. What we were finding was some of the commissions wanted to create a subcommittee that would qualify to be an ad hoc, but to talk about larger issues, homelessness, pedestrian safety, and that sort of thing. So when I said that ad hoc subcommittees should be approved by council. It was more those types of subcommittees, something that council is working on or staff is working on, or you may have the Public Safety Commission working with the Transportation Commission to talk about pedestrian safety. And that was actually one of the ad hoc subcommittees that came up. And we thought, let's have conversations about it. A public safety commissioner and a transportation commissioner got together, staff got together, and thought we should bring an item to council, because council would probably want to say what they should be looking at, how many times they should meet, how long they should have this subcommittee. So it's for more of those larger things that some of our commission and advisory board members want to do, but for regular ad hoc subcommittees to work on programming that are already within their work programs or in their purview, that's approved right at the lower level. So does that make sense?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Yvonne. There was a question regarding an update on host compliance. The information that Councilmember Horvath provided is correct. Staff is looking to come back later this year, likely at the end of the summer, September, with an update on the effects of the program. We're also adding some technology and permitting systems that will tie into the program that'll give us much more information and better information. So that's something that we'll be working on over the summer. There were a couple of things raised about questions about West Hollywood Housing Corporation. I think there were the three items. One of the items was including them in trainings that we provide to our social service agencies. We have been doing that. There's training this week. They're going to be participating. They've already RSVP'd in that. The other item about them meeting with the COG, I would assume that's kind of an irregular meeting. That would be something infrequent, but maybe once a year they would do a presentation or meet with their counterparts with the West Side cities. That wouldn't be a problem. I think the last item that was raised regarding the town hall or the meeting, that would need a little bit more discussion from or better understanding from us.
Okay, so that, we're going to discuss that after,
Yeah,
later.
that's it, yeah.
Okay.
But that, yeah, so, but 2 out of 3 are good. There was a question regarding monitoring the portfolios of both the state and county pools. While we don't have the authority to restrict them, we do monitor them, and they have been honoring their commitment to manage the portfolio with socially conscious programs. Lastly, just a few updates, administrative updates, administrative services. It's a reminder, I'm sure, that the city clerk was going to do this at the end of the meeting. Our regularly scheduled meeting for July is being moved to the 9th. So we're going to have 2 weeks of consecutive meetings. We'll have the meeting on the 9th and then another council meeting on the 16th. In regards to item 2H on tonight's agenda, the status report from Los Angeles County Lesbian and Women's Health Collaborative. The manuscripts by this group have been accepted for publication by the Health Equality Journal. This is really a big deal. And Health Care Experiences of Underrepresented Lesbians and Bisexual Women. This is based on the collaborative workforce representing this year's work, so that's wonderful. Also a note from our communications division, we are going to be launching our brand new website at the end of this month, so it should be an amazing work product. It's something that's very intuitive, and it's taken over 6 months to develop it with a lot of user interface, so I congratulate everyone who worked on that program. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. We'll now move to the fiscal impact on the consent calendar. The consent calendar is a motion in which many routine matters can be handled upon in one single motion. First of all, I'll ask the city clerk for a report on the fiscal impact on tonight's consent calendar.
Yes, the fiscal impact with the removal of items 2J, 2U, and 2V is $7,622,280 in expenditures, $0 in potential revenue, and $36,044 in waived fees.
Thank you. It's been moved by D'Amico, seconded by Heilman to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor, please vote with an aye. Consent calendar passes unanimously, noting Councilmember Meister's nay vote on item 2D. That moves us now into unfinished business, starting with item 4A, which is the budget.
Great. While staff is coming up to do the formal presentation, I want to announce that we're pleased to present the fiscal year 18-20 operating budget, and we have a short video to play for you while they're setting up. Thank you.
Yvonne, are there any speakers on this item?
No,
There are no speakers on this item.
we have one speaker now.
That was very nice. It almost makes budgeting look fun. As you saw in the video, we've organized expenditures into a set of budget priorities. These include public safety, homelessness, neighborhood livability, capital project management, and organizational development. Overall, we're forecasting revenues to grow steadily and expenditures to remain within budget. We have a structurally sound budget once again this year. Our Director of Finance and Technology, Lorena Quijona, and her team are going to provide a much more detailed presentation of key revenues, expenditures, organizational changes and recommendations in the budget, and of course, they're going to be here to answer all of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'm wondering, my colleagues, just to let the public know, we have a budget subcommittee that Councilmember Heilman and I have served on in preparing this budget. This is the second time it's been on the agenda. I think all 5 council members have spent hours and hours reviewing documents and meeting with city staff and city manager to get updated on the budget. So we have 2 speakers. I'm wondering if my colleagues would be okay with just accepting that video presentation and the comments of the city manager as a staff report. We go to the public, because I think most of the work is going to be the 5 of us horse trading. Is that okay? Anybody need a more thorough staff report other than what we've already all received individually?
I think it would be nice for staff to at least highlight the major initiatives, if they could do that in a couple of minutes, because there are people watching who haven't had time to read the budget. And
Okay.
it'd be great for them to know what the major things are coming up this year.
You can
Could you do that in a couple of minutes?
Can you do an executive summary? Okay. All right, who's going first, revenues or expenses? Revenues, okay.
I'm going to do a summary of the big picture. So we're going to try to get this done pretty fast. As we already saw in the budget video, we have a balanced budget. We have both the 18 and 19 and the 19-20 budget presented in front of you as recommended. Expenses are 135 million. Oh, sorry, that was revenues. 132 million in operating expenses and 10 million in capital projects. From those, Christine will give a brief overview of the initiatives, and Claudia will provide a brief overview of the revenues. So we're going to do something quickly on revenues, and then we'll talk about the initiatives.
Claudia Duncan, I'm the acting revenue manager. I'll jump right in. Over the past 5 years, we've experienced significant growth in revenues, and we foresee that for the future at an estimated average rate of approximately 6% per year. The general fund, which is the city's primary source of unrestricted revenue, is expected to increase by 8.4 million next year. Most of this revenue, 72.8 or 70% to be exact, is coming from tax receipts. And in the tax category, the three major revenue sources are transient occupancy tax, or TOT, property tax, and sales tax. The revenue from hotel tax are expected at 27 million, which represents an increase of 4% over the prior year. This is our largest single source of revenue, as you know, bringing in 37% of our tax revenue. This budget is considered conservative in preparation for any unforeseen delays on the hotels that were expected to open soon. So any change in that can impact the city's TOT revenue forecast. It should be noted that we do not anticipate any drastic changes on the market's existing occupancy rates and ADR. However, we will not really know for certain until these hotels actually open. For property tax, which is the second source of revenue at 26% of total revenue, that continues to show strong and steady gains due to the combination of factors, including rising property values, steady volumes of sales transactions, and the addition of new buildings in the city's property tax roll. During fiscal year 18-19, the city anticipates 8% increase in revenues from property tax for a total budget of amount of 19 million. For sales tax use, which is our third highest source of revenue, that has shown reliable growth in recent years and is expected to increase by 2%, approximately 17 million in sales tax in fiscal year 18-19. Most of the city's other revenue sources, such as business license tax, franchise fees, recreation fees, those are expected to remain flat or grow modestly. In general, the city's revenue budget is sound, and we expect to see continued growth. Now Christine will give you the overview of the general fund expenditures. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Christine Seyfried, Senior Management Analyst in the Finance Department. I will just give you a summary of the 5 priorities developed during the 2-year budget process as highlighted in the video. Public safety is the city's first priority. This year, the budget focuses on enhancing collaborative public safety activities, including expansion of the Security Ambassadors Program to 24/7 on the East Side and in the East Side neighborhoods. Additional security enhancements at city parks and facilities, those were begun during the mid-year budget process. The creation of an alcohol liaison officer with the Sheriff's Department, and implementation of the Smart City Public Safety Pilot Project, among other smart city initiatives. Homelessness is another key priority in the city. The budget recommends funding for new and expanded services to address homelessness and its related impacts in our community. Neighborhood livability remains a city priority. Municipal code enforcement, particularly related to home sharing services, ride sharing, construction permits, and cannabis, are included in this priority area. Earlier this year, City Council also approved funding for enhanced sidewalk cleaning services in commercial areas and impacted residential streets near those areas. Meanwhile, the Sunset Trip Entertainment Shuttle has begun a 6-month pilot project, and the city is continuing its efforts to secure light rail service to the city and thereby improve access and mobility for residents, visitors, and employees. Our next priority is capital project management. The city manages a very robust capital improvement program for routine maintenance of existing capital assets, as well as the acquisition and development of new facilities. This year, the capital improvement program will be managed by the Deputy City Manager of Community Services, with additional support from the new Urban Design and Architecture Studio. Our final priority, as listed in the budget, is organizational development. The city is committed to maintaining transparency and integrity in its operations and to improving employee engagement through training, professional development, and communication. The budget also includes funding for new technology and software upgrades, including web-based public record systems, electronic timesheets, and other resources to improve organizational efficiency. Based on a recent survey conducted by one of the city's operating units, additional training and opportunities for growth were identified as important needs for employees. The budget includes funding for trainings that will support employee growth and improve overall customer service. We will also implement several cross-departmental teams that focus on areas such as technology, performance management, and risk management, which provide additional growth opportunities and enhance cross-departmental communication. Additional details regarding budget expenditures are presented in the budget document, in the staff report, and in the video. With that, I'll turn things back over to Lorena, who will conclude our presentation with an update on the city's staffing and organizational structure. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. The recommended budget includes additional organizational and staffing enhancements that advance the city's commitment to our constituents. There are three new staff positions that are being considered for the upcoming fiscal year. One of them is a human resources supervisor. The second is a senior lifeguard in the recreation department, and an assistant planner in current and historic preservation planning. The city will also be extending the planning counter walk-in hours so that counter is open from 8 to the close of business day to enhance her services. And in addition, we'll continue to also offer appointments in the afternoon. As mentioned by Christine, the city has created an urban design and architecture studio. This new division will oversee a team that collaborates with other departments and divisions on a project-by-project basis. The division includes a manager-level position, the city's urban designer, and 3 additional members of the existing capital projects team, which are underway. The city has also created a strategic initiatives division to oversee a number of key human services initiatives, including Aging in Place, the Lesbian and Bisexual Women's Health Collaborative, and the Homeless Initiative. These will be housed in the city's effort to reduce poverty. Finally, the mobility functions currently housed in the Long Range and Mobility Planning Division are being moved to the Engineering Division. The division is being renamed to Long Range Planning. This concludes our report, and we're happy to respond to any questions that the council or the public might have. Thank you.
Are there any council member questions for Ms. Quijano, Duncan, or Seyfried? Okay, hearing none at this point, we'll go to the public. Next, we have 2 speakers. Ivy Bottini, to be followed by Victor Olmanchenko, who will be our final speaker.
Hello again. Ivy Bottini, West Hollywood. The other night, after dining at Marco's, I was wandering up the avenue and I decided to go into the new marijuana shop. And as I entered, I gotta admit, I really felt naughty. And I forgot it's not 1950 anymore. I was amazed. First of all, it felt like I was walking into Apple because of all the neon and the buttons and the, it was fascinating. And I can see where the city will be making a lot of money. I found out, it's amazing who you see in the pot shop and the conversations, if you just stand by somebody long enough, the information you garner. But I understand that the city has already made quite a bit of money from the pot shop applications. And I've been told that it runs about $3 million. And that's applications. Can you imagine from the sales? And that's just one shop. So I would like to suggest that anybody that comes in from that source goes to homelessness and more low-income housing, and that we try to, you know, I'm being a senior myself, and I'm lucky enough not to need housing help. There are things that I can't do any longer, and at least I can get out. So please, what is it, aging it in place? We need to age in place, but they need help, they need help. We need more housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Victor Olmanchenko, who is our final speaker.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Victor Olmanchenko, longtime resident of West Hollywood and always interested in the budget. And I love hearing the word balanced budget. And thank you for preparing this voluminous budget. It is probably the most important document that comes out during the year, and I hope more and more people review it because it's a really interesting thing. It shows us where we're going ahead as a city over the next biennium. So what I would just like to suggest, having looked through the budget, that the proposed alcohol liaison officer, that appears to be a much needed position, but is the city also planning for any personnel resources related to the cannabis issue, to the marijuana issue? We may need some enforcement there, and we may need resources directed there at some point. There is a position of risk officer that has now shifted amongst 3 departments and divisions as far as I can tell, and I would be interested at some point hearing about what the duties and responsibilities of this risk officer position are, which I understand is going to be reporting to the deputy city manager, if I'm not wrong. And it's wonderful to see that $1.5 million is going into the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund as a result of the relatively new public benefits framework. Well, there's been some recent public concern raised regarding how such benefits are calculated and distributed. So I think that doing more public outreach, putting it into the budget to explain these benefits is much needed in our community. Let's learn more about what kind of public benefits we can indeed get as big development projects come through the city. And the other thing I wanted to mention is the organizational changes. I look forward to seeing what comes out of the urban design and architecture studio concept. That's an interesting crossing the stovepipes, where you have a team from different divisions and departments looking at that very important issue. And the last thing I'd like to say is for many years, we've worked with Bob Chung and Walter Davis on transportation issues and traffic issues and bicycle infrastructure issues, and I hope that those issues are still on the forefront because they have been in the Long Range and Mobility Planning Division, but now it looks like they're being put into Public Works under engineering, and I hope we don't lose our vision looking at that whole area of transportation and traffic and bicycling infrastructure. Thank you for the extra time, Mayor.
Thank you, Victor. That concludes public comment. Which council member would like to begin discussion? Mayor Pro Tem D'Amico.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your effort and your work. And I think probably there aren't many questions from me. I have a challenge to the new head of the Community Housing Corporation, and that is, according to our budget, we have $21 million in unspent Housing Trust Fund dollars, and we have a housing crisis, and I think our city should investigate ways in which we can begin to invest that in making housing and consider whether being in the bank is the best place for those dollars. I agree with Ivy, she's being coy. I was the one who told her that we have $3 million from the cannabis applications, and I challenge my colleagues to dedicate those dollars to human services. It wouldn't be wise to do it tonight, but we have 5 people reviewing those applications, and then they go to this commission and maybe that committee, but certainly we're not going to spend $3 million in staff time evaluating 300 applications, and we know that there are hungry people in our community, and we know there are seniors who need assistance, and so I challenge the Human Services Commission to come up with a plan for our human services dollars. And I believe later we'll be talking about the survey. Whether or not we do that survey, we certainly know that there are needs in our community, and there seem to be at least some excess dollars from there. And finally, I just want to say that I feel super fortunate to be a city council member in this city because the hard work long before I got here put us in a position to take advantage of the long, endless line of 25 to 50-year-olds with $100 bills who just want to come here and drop them off. And they do that every day, every weekend, and we all love living here because it's an exciting place to live, and they all love coming here because it's an exciting place to spend some time. And I think we do our part. More importantly, the community does its part in letting us know how to continue to use our budgeted dollars. Clearly, there's not that many people who are upset about how we're doing it because, though certainly the 2 members of the public who spoke brought up excellent points of view, and hopefully we can incorporate some of them. I think our budget is sound, our decisions are sound, and I'm looking forward to voting to move this forward. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Who would like to go next? Nobody's ringing in.
I'm happy to go next.
Okay, Councilmember Horvath.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to our staff for all of your hard work and your hard work on making this budget come together and address the priority issues that have come forward in our community. And no disrespect to the presentation that was given tonight, it was very much appreciated. But I think if Victor Olmachenko gave our budget presentation every year, I think that would be kind of amazing. A few items that I wanted to highlight in the budget that maybe we could have for additional discussion tonight. I want to start with the communications budget. It seems that there's been additional budgetary allocation to improve communication internally at City Hall, which is good. But I also think that we need to make sure that we have the resources we need for external communication. And so it looks like there's only a $25,000 increase to advertising and publicity for the communications department. I think other divisions also asked for increase, but I can't see those costs, those requests broken out. So I don't really have a sense of what kind of resources we have to communicate with our public. If you could address where we're at with communication budget.
Thank you. So in terms of advertising and publicity and communications, we've done a few things. The communications department has been broken out into 2 divisions. There's the main communications department as well as media and marketing division. With that split, the overall budget for the department has increased by several $100,000. Much of that is for external focus on communications, media, and marketing. In addition, there have been individual line items that have increased within the communications department, and I believe we provided a breakout of that by email earlier this week. I can look up the details in a few minutes if you'd like. And then thirdly, our communications department team has met individually and in groups with all of our divisions and departments in the city during and in advance of the budget process. And they created several documents that explained the different costs of communicating, ad sheets, media costs, marketing costs, and assisted the different divisions in understanding the costs for communicating and budgeting those costs within their programs. And so the way that the city tackles communications in our program budgets is to include the cost of advertising and communicating in the program budgets. So there's not a button we can push in our software that says break out the communications budgets. They're built into our overall program budgets. And so for individual programs, all of our division managers can answer those questions, but there's not a centralized place that's working on that.
Okay, so for example, the bike share program, which I think is going to be a topic of discussion tonight, I don't know what the communications budget, or if there is a communications budget. I think it's moving to the parking division now, and when those budgets aren't broken out, I don't really know what kind of resources are being invested. So maybe you, for example, could talk about what sort of communications budget there is to help promote our bike share program.
What I would do in that instance is ask our bike share team to come up to the podium and respond.
Good evening, Bianca Siegel, Long Range Planning Manager, and then the parking team is on standby right next to me. So in the current fiscal year budget, there's about $35,000 that is budgeted and still to be spent out in its entirety on bike share marketing. And I believe that in next year's budget, there is about $10,000 that's dedicated for bike share marketing.
Okay, so given that we have a concern about the level that we're operating at with our bike share program, perhaps we could invest a little bit more in making sure that people know about the bike share program and do some innovative things to get people's attention to that program if we're going to continue to invest our city resources in it. With regard to I guess while you're here, the bike infrastructure improvements, I know when we did the last analysis of the bike share program, there was a demonstrated need for increased bike infrastructure. Can you talk about what's included in the budget to help make it safer for biking?
Sure, and I might ask the engineering division to come and join me since they'll be implementing that.
Right.
There is a CIP program that will be within that division. It's 8305 for reference in the budget. That's the CIP program number. There is a substantial amount of funding in the next 5 fiscal years to implement that, and the recommendation is that those projects be implemented in the priority order that they're identified in the adopted pedestrian and bicycle plan. So some of the top priorities for bike infrastructure particularly are a greenway on Almont, moving forward with design of a neighborhood greenway as well on Willoughby and Vista and Gardner to further build out some key bike infrastructure on the east side. That would those would be the top priority items to move forward, and then there are additional bike network items over the next 4 years.
Okay, I just want to make sure that if we're concerned about our bike share program and our ability to bike around the community, that we're actually investing in addressing that issue, so we aren't continuing to operate in a sort of problematic situation. We feel confident with what we have moving forward?
Yes, we have set aside enough budget in the next fiscal year to tackle all of the bike lane programs all throughout the city.
Okay, thank you very much. I know that the question, on a different topic, I know the question regarding the streetlights program was answered, and that it's coming back to us. Full control of the streetlights are coming to us next month for consideration. I just want to make sure that we do immediately get control of those streetlights, and that especially the streetlights that have been requested on the east side get I know that money is in the budget, so that's great. I'm happy about that, but that we spend it to get those lights up and operational as quickly as possible. I'm glad to see that the Next Gen programming is continued to be funded. These events have been really well attended and engaged a new demographic in our city, and so if that funding isn't sufficient, I hope that staff will let us know right away, because there is continued interest in that programming, and I want to thank our staff for continuing to do that. And finally, I want to talk about some additions for my colleagues' consideration for the Sheriff's Department. And I think having served both on the Liability Trust Fund Oversight Committee, as well as taking a council member training course that was provided by the Sheriff's Department, I got some insights into things that help our sheriff's stations run more smoothly. One thing that was mentioned during our training were additional equipment items, trauma kits and Narcan kits, as well as some additional non-lethal tactics and equipment that the Sheriff's Department uses to de-escalate situations in a safer way. So I know that I had a conversation with Public Safety about these equipment requests. Is it still the case that we're able to fund some of those additional equipment items?
I'll take a stab at it while Kristen's in the back, because I was copied on the emails. We can work with the department to look at those cost items and come back to council. There's usually some savings at the end of the year that we can allocate to help with some of the equipment purchase. I think it would be our preference that this would just be an acquisition that the Sheriff's Department makes, and we would reimburse them, as opposed to us buying that type of equipment that could be used in that type of situation. We really don't want that on our books, and we wouldn't know how really to go about procuring it. But if it's something that is within a dollar amount, $20,000, $30,000, that's easily something that we could accommodate in our year-end savings. And conversations have already begun with our captain, so we can report back on that.
Okay, as long as they're able to acquire those things, I'm fine with reimbursement, so long as those items they can actually acquire them. And then, if it's okay with my colleagues, I'd also like to give direction that we review the existing sheriff's station for facility upgrades. I know that there will be a move or a redevelopment of the sheriff's station at some point in the future, but if you visited the sheriff's station lately, it could use a little love, and if our staff could come back to us in 90 days, perhaps with a proposal of some upgrades. One specifically I would request is equipment lockers for our deputies. They currently have to store all of their belongings in their cars, both while they're here, but also they take their equipment home with them. So having a locker at the station allows them the ability to not have to transport all of those things all the time and keep them safely stored. So I think that in particular would be an important addition to the station. And finally, if you could give an update on the East Side Public Safety Office, where we're at on that, and how the progress is going on that office.
I knew the address this morning. I can't recall the address. We do own a building on the east side across the street from Plummer Park. It's part of the facilities capital work program. They're going to be analyzing the building this year to do a major rehab of that property, and it would be an east side annex for City Hall, and we would have space not only for our security, but for also, it could be a stop-in center also utilized by the Sheriff's Department. So the timing would be, we'll report back with cost estimates at the end of the summer.
Okay. While we're looking at cost estimates, one option that we might also want to consider at that same time is perhaps a more accessible storefront if that facility doesn't actually serve the needs that we're trying to address on the east side in terms of a drop-in facility. I think in other communities, I know an ancillary office like that serves more as a storefront kind of experience. And so I know that there are some empty storefronts on the east side that might be a better suited fit if the cost of rehabbing what we have is not going to address the concerns that we're trying to address on the east side.
And are you considering this just for public safety?
Well, we can strategize about what that is, but my point is if we're rehabbing a facility, it needs to address the community needs we're trying to deal with. Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Heilman.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you again to our staff who put together a very ambitious budget and a very comprehensive one. I have a few minor issues. Let me get one of them out of the way. On page 82, you make reference to the Lapeer Kimpton Hotel will be opening, but it's already open, so that's just a timing issue. So if you could change that for the final version. The big picture issue, I think, is much more important. As you said earlier, you're presenting us with not only a balanced budget, but one where our revenues are actually going to exceed the proposed expenditures for the year. Secondly, you've done a really excellent job of identifying the priorities that we've heard over the last couple of years from the community. Public safety, of course, being critical. Addressing the homelessness crisis also being important. Focusing on neighborhood livability. There are some internal priorities as well, but I really want to thank you for that. And this budget actually reflects that with the dollar amounts. For me, there are some challenges moving forward. My colleague, Councilmember D'Amico, mentioned the increased revenue, and some of the speakers also mentioned the increased revenue from cannabis sales. Putting that towards public services, putting that towards social services, affordable housing, that seems to make sense. I don't want to, at this time, say, yes, we have to spend all of it for that. I think we need to do that thoughtfully and really look at what the community's needs are. One of the things that I'm thinking with our affordable housing trust funds, there are going to be some buildings that have to be retrofitted, but the current owners don't want to do it. It's too much of a hassle for them. They may be looking to sell. So there may be opportunities for affordable housing providers to purchase buildings and take on that responsibility of retrofitting, and then preserving those units as affordable and moderate income housing in the city. One other issue we have coming up is the retrofitting and the potential of costs being passed through to tenants. That has not been finalized yet, but there certainly has been discussion, and we've also heard from a number of tenants who would be adversely impacted by any kind of pass-through. So rather than spending all that money tonight or right away, and I agree that we shouldn't, we need to think about how is that going to impact our long-term residents. Maybe we need to look at using some of that money to preserve people in their existing apartments. My overall sense, and being on the budget subcommittee with the mayor, we were able to review this previously. I just again want to thank you for all of the work that goes into this and managing all of the requests from the different departments and the community, and really winnowing it down to something that's presentable and makes sense. So thank you for that. I'm very supportive and look forward to the work that's going to be implemented on the priorities in the upcoming years. Thank you.
Yes, I have a couple of quick questions first. The sales and use tax that is expected to increase 2%, that doesn't include cannabis sales yet, does it? So we haven't really estimated anything for cannabis sales.
No, not yet. That's not included. I think projecting that it's a little bit tricky right now, so we didn't include it on the budget.
Okay. No, but that's good, because that means that there's money that we haven't accounted for yet.
And there's two things on the cannabis, if I could just add a little bit. I think the 2.7 that we received is a strong number, and hopefully the cost of the license is comparable to that amount, because that's what it's supposed to be. I think moving forward is, yes, there is going to be a revenue windfall from retail cannabis. It hasn't been around long enough, and I think we'll be getting some of the sales tax projections soon, so we could see what impacts we've had on our medical facilities selling retail now, so we could at least get a jump in the sales tax. Also, what is in the work program for next year is an item to study two potential revenue initiatives. One revenue initiative is to advance rail to West Hollywood as a potential tax measure, but as part of that, we're also looking at a potential cannabis tax. So those would be two revenue sources that we would be looking at. Insofar as programming the dollars, especially from the cannabis revenue, we can provide much better information at mid-year once we have somewhat of a history in terms of the potential revenue sources. And at that time, we could work with the council on concepts on best way to program the funding. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question is, will the dedicated alcohol liaison officer also conduct visits to cannabis lounges once established?
That wasn't necessarily part of the scope of that position, but I wouldn't see why not. To put out first, we've had the cannabis businesses in West Hollywood for a number of years now, and they have not really been problematic. I think actually one of the things that we found surprising is when we did the discussion, the roundtable discussion with other communities, is that they really haven't had the public safety impact that they thought they were going to have. That being said, we will have resources dedicated to track that, and if need be, we will come back to council and ask for additional support.
Thank you. And then I just have a couple of questions about parking meters and also the bicycles. I don't know if anyone wants to come up from Public Works, but in the budget, it says that we're going to be adding 100 more bicycles and 10 more stations, and I just want to confirm that we're not doing that.
I think you're referring to the CIP program that includes bike share expansion. That's been in place in the previous budget as well. Our contract with the current bike share operator allows for future year expansion at the sole discretion of the council, of course. And so we wanted to earmark those funds should the council choose to go in that direction in the future.
Okay, but that's not something that's happening unless we decide as a body. Okay, great. And then regarding the parking meters, there's 1.1 million going into new parking meters, and I just wanted to get just a brief. Is anyone here from?
Sure,
Here comes
that's a
Oscar.
question for Public Works and Parking. They'll be right up.
We're waiting to hear the whole question before they come down, in case it's a question they don't want to answer.
I just want to make sure that this, it's a lot of money, 1.1 million. So the differences between the MK and the M3 meters, and are our old meters breaking down? Are we going to have some substantial revenue from the new meters with the zeroing out when a car leaves and the sensors and all of that?
Well, Oscar Delgado, Deputy City Manager, and I've got all the parking stuff behind us. The new meters, well, they do several things. One of them is the life expectancy of our meters are getting up there, but also the new meters do occupancy studies. Because they do, after a certain period of time, they zero out so they can tell when nobody's parked there. So from the way we do occupancy studies now, which is literally very manual, and very labor intensive, we wouldn't have to do that. Plus we'd get real-time occupancy on all of our meters. The new meters also take like Google Pay and Apple Pay, so you can pay with your credit cards, where our earlier generations don't necessarily do that anymore.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions for you. So a couple of things. All right, so regarding the budget for Historic Preservation Commission, we have the new assistant planner position that you want us to approve tonight, and I would like my colleagues, to support someone who has at least some background in historic preservation for that new planning position. Doesn't have to be dedicated necessarily, but at least have some background and an interest in historic preservation, because since we went through the commercial survey, there are things that we could be doing, like reaching out to these property owners to see if they want to be designated. I mean, right now, we don't have staff, doesn't have the time to do that. The budget shows no increase for historic preservation from this fiscal year. So, I mean, we say we're committed to historic preservation, and, how we spend our money shows our commitment. I would also like to see, and we talked about this, just some more educational events. They don't have to be, like the annual event in terms of how much money we spend, but it would be nice to be able to educate people who live in craftsman homes about the value of designation, and also about the Mills Act, which, apparently we not only need to educate people about, but also we need better enforcement of the Mills Act, of the businesses, of the buildings that already have the Mills Act. So I would like to see some support of that. Regarding the revenue from cannabis, which we don't know what that is yet, I would like to see some of that go towards public safety and 24-hour block by block for parts of the city in addition to the east side. I think, once we establish, once we have new establishments, and they're not going to be just on the east side, they're going to be on the west side, and they're going to be in Center City, I think it would make sense for us to have a 24-hour block by block for the rest of the city, and also the alcohol liaison officer, which we wouldn't want to call alcohol liaison, but the fungi liaison officer, I don't know, whatever you want to call him. Then I noticed that on the Hart House improvements, there's no budget included for improvements of the dog park, and I know that we talked about that, and I know we're waiting for a lease to get signed, but I really hope that we can find the money for, the same kind of fake grass that we have at the dog park in WeHo Park, and better lighting, and of course, ADA compliance. Regarding the bike share system expansion, again, I would like to see money go towards infrastructure before we spend money on more bicycles. Regarding special events, I'd really like to see some of our other advisory boards, like the Transgender Advisory Board and the Senior Advisory Board, have this kind of funding for events and programming, like the Women's Advisory Board has and the Russian Advisory Board has. So I hope that we can do that. And regarding the Housing Trust Fund, I agree with my colleagues and would also like to see some of that money go towards preserving existing housing, whether that's through the West Hollywood Community Housing Corporation or in other ways. I think that's really something that we need to do is work on keeping those buildings, upgrading those buildings, both seismic and codes and building codes, and have some kind of agreement so it's not a gift of public funds, but that we ensure that we keep those units rent stabilized. And want to echo my good wishes, also echo my colleagues' good wishes for Robin and your retirement, and congratulate Jesse Slansky, and looking forward to that starting a new road, and hopefully with the Housing Trust Fund giving the West Hollywood Community Housing Corp some more support in the areas that they need it. And those are my comments for now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we Adopt the resolution adopting the budget consistent with the discussion that council members offered tonight, that we adopt the division and capital work plans presented in the operating budget, approve the list of pre-approved organization and events, approve adding the positions that were outlined in the staff report, and authorize the Director of Finance to allocate $2 million in general fund reserves for the purchase of Prop A funds. It's been moved and seconded. City Manager Aravallo.
Just want to request that there were a number of items that were discussed tonight, and we would like time to review and come back. I can tell you some of them we can do, some of them we can't do, but we would have to look for other ways to accomplish those goals. So with that being said, if the budget is adopted as presented with those bullet items that came up during the council members' discussion as report back items, we will report back on those items as soon as possible.
All right, thank you, sir. Been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Mayor Pro Tem, I'm sorry.
I am, and I meant to mention this. When we were talking about the events, or rather, when it was mentioned, I wanted to also mention that this is always a tricky thing because many of these events are, they have a legacy here in the city and they serve people in different ways, but some of these events I think are per person, they're quite expensive, nearly $100 a person, $75 a person, and then others, you know, like the $2 million almost we spend on the Halloween Carnival is $3 a person, and certainly I know I have $3 worth of fun at the Halloween Carnival. But so I guess what I'm asking City Manager is perhaps you can help some of these events and their organizers come forward with a strategy to offset some of these costs with maybe their constituents that attend, or organizations that are like-minded could assist us in organizing them. But I think it's very, I think you know, just to choose one of them, and because I have to choose one of them, but it doesn't make sense to me that we would spend $75 a person for a cannabis forum when there are maybe hundreds of cannabis businesses who I think would be very interested in helping us throw a cannabis forum. And I think if we could find ways to both encourage more participation and consider our budgetary interests, that might be a good thing to do. On the other hand, it's $7,500 and we have a $100 million budget. Having a cannabis forum might be exactly the right thing to spend $7,500 on. So I just put that as a final thought, and take your time getting back to us. But I do think we've been having discussions about events, and I think that's something we should look at more closely. Thank you, Mayor, for that. Sorry.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor to adopt the budget for fiscal year 2018-2019. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you to all our finance staff. Thank you. That moves us to new business. The first item is item 5A, which is environmental impact report review, initiated by council members Meister and Horvath. Who is presenting this item?
I can present it. Okay, so this is an item on bringing back the environmental impact report review that the city of West Hollywood used to have a number of years ago. What it was is a public meeting at the Planning Commission when the 30-day review period was in force on the draft environmental impact report. And what it did was it gave both the community and the planning commissioners an opportunity to ask questions and give concerns about the draft environmental impact report at a time when it wasn't already coming to them for project approval, where many times, if you watch planning commission meetings, and I do, I don't know why, but I do, the meeting tends to be about design issues. It tends to be about the project as a whole, but not looking at specific impacts and getting questions answered. So we did have this before. It was useful, and planning commissioners, it really ensured that planning commissioners were able to review the draft environmental impact report and dedicate some time to it, express concerns in advance, that were not necessarily focused on zoning codes or design. It also gave the public an opportunity to make comments in front of planning commissions, so planning commissioners would have a better idea of community concerns with regard to environmental impacts. And it also gave the developers an opportunity to hear concerns at a point in the process when maybe they could come up with more mitigations. So I thank Councilmember Horvath for co-sponsoring this with me, and I hope that my colleagues will support this.
And just one addition, the opportunity to have public comment from our Planning Commission and our public while the public comment period on the DEIR is still open seems to make logical sense. That's where you want to have those comments recorded and noted, as Councilmember Meister said, so something can actually be done about them. So this seemed like a logical choice.
Just add that it doesn't add any more time to the process because it's within that 30-day review period.
All right, thank you. We have 3 members of the public who wish to be heard before we conduct council deliberations. Elise Eisenberg, to be followed by Stephanie Harker, to be followed by Matt Dubin.
Mayor Duran?
Yes.
I have a number of citizen position slips here. The following people did not wish to speak but wanted to express their support.
Yvonne, before you do that, when you report those, would you just identify the city of residence along with the name?
Okay,
That
if
would be
they've
helpful.
listed it, I'll
That would be
add it.
helpful, okay.
In support of the recommended item, Richard Giesbrecht, West Hollywood, Polly Businger, West Hollywood, Jennifer Kreendler, West Hollywood, Mike Carter, West Hollywood, Manny Rodriguez, West Hollywood, Kathy Blavis, West Hollywood, and Victor Omolchenko, West Hollywood.
Thank you. Elise Eisenberg, to be followed by Stephanie Harker.
Okay, Elise Eisenberg, West Hollywood. I usually speak extemporaneously because I don't usually write things out, and since I did send you guys all an email, I thought I would read it into the record. But I don't read, you'll have to forgive me. Okay, I do support this this item. This was historically allowed, but it was stopped a few years ago by a deputy city manager with the stated intent of streamlining the process for the developers, but it was actually, the underlying motive was to eliminate the public process, an act wholly antithetical to a democracy and to the principles of West Hollywood. It resulted in an utter lack of transparency in the development approval process, which has removed any real authority or power by the planning commissioners to have any meaningful input and reduces them to no more than rubber stamping staff recommendations. It also gives too much power and authority to staff who is supposed to be working at the planning commissioner's direction and not the other way around. This, for members of the public who are most impacted and have legitimate concerns that might need to be and could be mitigated, it effectively eliminates the possibility for these issues to be considered, since their voices are not heard until literally days before a project is voted on, when it is much too far along, when too much money has been spent to make it cost-effective for a developer to make the kind of changes that might alleviate many concerns if they've been brought to the attention of the developer earlier in the process. Very few people have the time or ability to read through 1,000 pages or more of the average DEIR to see what a project will ultimately entail. They are often not aware of a project or the DEIR process until just before a vote because of the limited surrounding area, usually 500 to 1,000 feet, that the city is obligated to notify, or because of the many notices they receive from the city because of the excessive amount of development that is occurring all around them. Many of these projects impact residents well beyond the limited notification area. Residents are alarmed when they find out about these projects only just before a pending vote, when a more alert neighbor brings it to their attention. This has resulted in an increasingly angry, frustrated public who feels blindsided at having a lack of information and barely a pretense of a cursory opportunity to have input into a project before it is summarily approved, as it always incredibly is. Basically, I'm supporting the proposal.
Thank you.
And so thank you in advance for approving it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephanie Harker, Matt Dubin, Richard Giesbert.
Stephanie Harker, City of West Hollywood. I too wanted to thank council members Meister and Horvath for bringing this forward. I feel that 5A will provide the planning commissioners and the public more time to evaluate the draft environmental report that will then be incorporated into the final EIR. It will also provide commissioners and the public more time to evaluate and draft the EIR, including the potential environmental impacts and mitigations before considering whether or not to recommend or approve the project. It states that the goal of this change is to increase transparency, and I think more and more, and especially in these days of covert actions by various governments, that transparency is everything. So the fact that this would increase the transparency and the EIR process to provide the public with opportunities to provide significant input and public comment on proposed new projects in the city is a good thing. Planning ahead, transparency, and public input are everything. Had this been the case when the 1,000 units on the east side were built, we might have realized that such things as 1,000 new units in 5 blocks with 1,000 new washer dryers and 1,000 new toilets would have meant a lot, and maybe that we should have taken those numbers down a bit in the plan. And also, those 5 buildings with 1,000 units had 2,262 new parking spaces in the buildings, but that meant that 2,262 more cars in 5 blocks. So I think this will certainly give the public and the commissioners a better chance at figuring things out before it's approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Dubin, Richard Giesbert.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Elise has proven the value of not speaking extemporaneously, but I am. But I want to speak in support of this, and really the main thrust of my support is that we do need to include the public, encourage the public and the commissioners to take their time to recognize all sides of the issue, to study these EIRs, and to make the effort to contemplate what they really mean, so that we don't have the distrust and the concerns of the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Giesbert.
Richard Giesbret, President of West Hollywood West Residents Association. I'd like to thank Ms. Eisenberg for speaking so eloquently about many points in favor of this proposal, and West Hollywood West supports this proposal as well. Many citizens have expressed a sense of disenfranchisement from the political process. At the end of the process, there's a crush of competing interests, and secondary concerns get short shrift. This proposal will bring more openness, perhaps circumspection, and hopefully greater opportunity for broader participation by our citizens. We feel that that's perhaps the most important part of the political process, that participation. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comments on this item. Who wishes to begin discussion? Councilmember Heilman.
Yes, I want to thank everyone for coming out and speaking. I don't agree with this item. I don't view this as actually increasing transparency in any way. The EIRs are already circulated, and some of the people who spoke tonight, and including one of the sponsors, have actually commented during the EIR process and have written letters, and that's part of the process where the public does have the right and the opportunity and frequently does provide very significant comments that are analyzed as part of the EIR process. I view this from the standpoint of our need for housing. And Ms. Harker spoke about how this would give us an opportunity to reduce housing. Well, I don't think that's what we need. I think we need additional housing to address the needs of a growing population in California. And I view this as increasing the burden on the Planning Commission. This would require an additional public hearing and a public forum where many of the people who speak will be speaking twice and saying the same things. Going back to the previous meeting where we approved the Robertson Lane project, if we had to have a separate hearing on the certification of the EIR and then the hearing on the project itself, do we really think that the outcome would be any different? I think the outcome would not have been any different, and I think what we would have had was 2 long public hearings, most of it repetitive, and I don't think it improves the process, nor do I think it improves transparency, nor do I think that the public is going to come out of that process feeling any better. So I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't support it. If we are to move forward with this, we should look at limiting this to a certain category of projects, but not every project needs to have a separate hearing for the EIR. Many of the projects that go forward are relatively non-controversial, and the EIR doesn't provide any great information that would change the outcome.
Thank you. Councilmember Meister.
Yeah, first of all, this would only apply to the Planning Commission and it would not apply to City Council. I think that as somebody who has talked at Planning Commission quite a bit before I was on this dais, that I found those meetings to be very helpful because planning commissioners were actually focused on environmental impacts, which they aren't necessarily focused on when the project comes to them for approval or recommendation once the DEIR comment period is over. We took away some workload from the Planning Commission by moving smaller residential projects off the table and given that to staff. We also changed the square footage on commercial projects that went to Planning Commission. So I think for large projects, I think that we owe it to our community to have this process, and in particular, our planning commissioners, to give them the time to focus on impacts on some of these projects, which have been a lot of our commercial projects have been large commercial projects that deserve scrutiny about the environmental impacts, and the ability to maybe get some comments from the public and from planning commissioners for recommendations for mitigations.
Thank you. Any other council member comments on this item? Mayor Pro Tem D'Amico.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to say something slightly off topic, which is that I have the sense that with the change in building technology and technology generally, that the CEQA process will become more and more irrelevant because the environmental impacts will begin to approach zero if they haven't already in many categories. But that said, I think that I support this. I think we should move forward. I was a planning commissioner for 5 years. And I will say to Councilmember Meister's point that in a planning commission meeting in which the discussion is over the environmental impact and not over whether this project will get approved, the discussion is different, the focus of staff is different, there is a sort of deeper dive into how this project will seat itself in the community. And I think we don't really have a moment for that since the removal of this from the Planning Commission. And so I support this. I'm happy if one of my colleagues would like to make the motion. I'm happy to vote for it, or I can second it, but I do have the sense that 5 years from now, given how technology is moving, given the crush of interest in developing housing, I had a quick discussion with Helene about this, that it does seem that CEQA and that piece of legislation is likely to change. And should, because with respect to the community member who was concerned about flushing toilets, those toilets are going to flush, whether they're flushing in West Hollywood or slightly downstream or slightly upstream. And we need to build as much housing appropriately as this city and every part of the state can accommodate. And we have the technology to do it smartly. And I think that we're gonna end up there. And I know we have a separate process to bring our ordinances around sustainability and resiliency forward and into the 21st century. And I think when that happens, the discussion about CEQA will change quite dramatically. So with that, I just want to say I appreciate my colleagues bringing this forward. I do think it gives a different kind of moment for this kind of discussion, and I am convinced that it does not slow projects down. It maybe fills them up a little more, and consultants get to bill more dollars to developers, potentially, but I think in the end, we have yet another moment to speak about the project.
Councilmember Heilman?
I'm sorry, I just want to respond to that last point. When consultants bill more and the developer is paying more, it isn't the developer who's going to pay. That's going to get added on to the cost of the project. And so the housing, if this is applying to housing, it just drives up the price of new housing that's being built. That's my only comment. It appears that there's 3 votes for this, so I won't say anything more.
Thank you. Seeing no further council discussion, the matter has been moved by Meister, seconded by Horvath. All those in favor signify with an aye. Motion passes 3-2. That moves us to item number 5B, under new business, consideration for innovative parking meter programs. This matter was initiated by council members Meister and Mayor Pro Tem D'Amico. Who would like to present?
Well, I would simply say, and I guess I decided that would be me, that this is merely asking for our parking staff. I think Councilmember Meister and I, really under her strong leadership when she first got elected, looked at a number of ways in which we could look at our parking plans and options, and many of those came to pass with fairly positive results. And I think this is another way for us to consider the technology that is available, the parking meters we just purchased, ways in which we can engage with the city, the cities around us, and with our community to give options for parking meter rates to residents and visitors. And I would guess this also means looking at demand driven rates as well. So with that, I think we're not asking for anything to change now, but for the staff to, the parking staff to study what some of the options might be.
Thank you. Councilmember Meister, anything to add to the item?
No, I think the thing is that we're perceived as not a very parking-friendly city, and I think that if we can come up with some ways to look at, especially when we have all these new parking meters, these fancy parking meters, we can look at maybe a different way of ticketing. If we're going to give citations, maybe we can look at a two-tier system, the idea of meter passes. I mean, I think we should be as innovative as our parking meters.
Thank you. Ms. Corker, we have no speakers on this item, correct? There are no speakers. We'll move into council member deliberation. Councilmember Heilman.
Yes, I thank you for bringing this forward, but I think it is a little bit confusing. When you look at some of the examples that you want staff to look at, giving residents a parking permit that would allow them to park at any parking meter for an unlimited time period, that doesn't make sense to me, because the whole point of our parking meters is to encourage turnover. That's why we have time limits there, so that those meters are freed up for customers. And the demand responsive pricing, that's not necessarily going to help our residents. That's likely going to increase the parking rates at particular times. I think a better use of staff time would be directed towards our existing residential neighborhoods where there are severe parking shortages. If you look in the Laurel, Hayworth, that neighborhood, there are very few parking spaces. Some of those neighborhoods are at 95% parking, which means you can't find a parking space. Our residents, to the extent that they're having to pay $2 per hour at a meter, that's not really the severe impact that I'm hearing about. I'm hearing about people coming home late at night and not finding a place to park in their neighborhood. And I'd rather have our staff use their time to focus on that rather than this, which seems to be, potential solutions that aren't that great in search of a problem.
Thank you. Councilmember Horvath.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with some of the comments that Councilmember Heilman noted. I think that some of the goals that are articulated may be not served, for example, by demand pricing that may actually increase the cost of parking. I'm fine with exploring these options. I don't agree with all of them. I think what they're asking us to do is understand them and consider them at a future date. So I'm happy to understand some of these options better, but I don't know that I agree with everything that's being looked into.
Any further council deliberation?
Yeah, I just want to add that
Meister?
we're not asking for approval on those individual items. We're asking staff to look into it. Maybe there's a permit that will be for meters for nighttime so that residents can park on Santa Monica Boulevard or something. But I think we need to be open to looking at creative options, and that's what we're asking for. And we can add to that Councilmember Heilman's request about looking at residential parking, but that's already an item that was passed by council several months ago.
Sensing no further council deliberation, is there a motion? It's been moved by Meister, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem D'Amico. All those in favor, please indicate with an aye. Motion passes 3-2. That moves us over to item number 5C, which is the appointment to various committees and boards. If you'll all turn, please, to attachment B. Suppose we will go down each item. The first is the Sanitation District. The delegate is normally the mayor. That's mine. Is there an interest in anybody in being the alternate? It looks like Councilmember Horvath was the alternate last year.
I would move that we appoint Lindsay as the alternate.
You wish to be the alternate again? All right, Horvath is the alternate. California Contract Cities Association, last year was Horvath and Meister. Is there an interest from any particular council member serving on the California Contract Cities Association? I think everyone's hoping the two of you will renew your interest.
I'm happy to continue.
All right, Horvath and Meister as the alternate. All right, Horvath and Meister. The Clean Power Alliance was a former Los Angeles Community Choice Energy Program. In the past, that was Councilmember Horvath and Meister with a staff appointee as an additional alternate.
I would like to continue that. I serve on the executive committee. I chair the legislative committee. I hold a number of leadership positions now from my past participation, if that's okay with the council.
Anybody else have an interest besides Councilmember Horvath? Seeing none, she is now the appointee. And anybody else? Do you want to continue, Lauren?
Yeah, I can because staff is also an alternate.
Okay, so Councilmember Meister and staff. The League of California Cities, historically, I think we've done whoever can attend. It looks like Councilmember Horvath was the appointee last year, and myself and Councilmember Meister as the alternates. Anybody know where that is? Is that in Long Beach this year? I think it's in Long Beach.
Yes.
November. Somebody saying yes. Thank you.
Yes.
September.
September in Long Beach. All right. Anybody have any interest in the League of California Cities? I feel like, Councilmember Horvath, you're getting heavy in commitments. Do you wish to continue that? You want somebody else to take it?
If somebody else wants to, I'm appointed through the COG, so I'll be going anyway. I'm already planning to be there. So if people don't want to go, I'm happy to represent the city.
Mayor Pro Tem or Councilmember Heilman, either of you have an interest? Nope.
I won't be able
Nope.
to.
I may be able to go, but
Okay, I will say I will do it, and then we'll have who is the alternate?
I'll be your alternate.
Okay, and Horvath is alternate, all right. The Los Angeles County City Selection Committee is the mayor, that's me, and we need an alternate. Looks like Councilmember Horvath was the alternate last year.
and I
Anybody-
think now we can have anyone serve as an alternate based on availability.
I believe the mayor would still have to
Right.
appoint that person or let that person go, so yes, as the alternate.
Any council colleague have an interest, or should we make it staff?
No, it can only be a council
Oh, only a
member.
council member?
And I think we probably, we can name somebody now, but when it comes to that meeting, we need to figure out who's going to be available.
So we should make it whoever's available?
Yeah.
Can we do that? Whoever's
Yes.
available? Can
Yes.
fill that alternate? Okay. National League of Cities, we did not attend last year because it was in North Carolina. I don't know where it is this year.
It's in LA.
Here, okay.
Los Angeles in November.
And that's in November. I assume we'll all be going. I have no interest in being a voting delegate, though, because I don't have the patience, but,
I serve on a committee and I chair another one, and so I'm happy. I'll be there. I'm happy to do it if nobody else wants to.
okay. Horvath, anybody want to be the alternate? I'm planning on going, but I don't, yeah.
And I really don't have to do it if somebody's eager to, just so I'm clear.
I'll be the alternate.
Heilman is the alternate, all right. The Public Agency Risk Sharing Authority, last year was Heilman, and David Wilson is the Director of Finance as the alternate. Is that a mayor thing?
Yes.
It is.
Okay, so that's me, and may we have David Wilson serve as the alternate again? Okay,
I believe there's some verbiage there.
I'm sorry?
I'm looking, there was some verbiage that David provided, and he asked that the appointing staff that are familiar with the city's risk practices should be appointed, such as the assistant city manager / risk manager. So you're going to pick David Wilson?
Yeah, we can pick a staff person.
Yes, we
as our representative.
Yes,
And
yes.
that, I never attended the meetings, David attended.
Okay.
Okay. Santa Monica Bay Watershed Council was council member, Mayor Pro Tem D'Amico, I think, because it's close to his office.
Yeah, and a staff member attends typically at my place.
You wish to
Sure.
continue, all right? D'Amico as the appointee and staff as the alternate. SCAG, Southern California Association of Government.
I'll be doing that because I'm on the policy committee, so.
Okay, so Councilmember Meister has an interest. Anybody else have an interest in that?
You couldn't pay me to go to those meetings.
Is there anybody who has an interest in being the alternate?
I know Lauren will be there, so I'm happy to be her alternate.
All right, Meister and Horvath as 1 and 2. Okay, the West Side City Council of Governments, last year was Meister and Heilman. Anybody have an interest in this?
I'd like to do it, but,
Heilman would like to.
okay.
Heilman wishes to do it. Meister is the alternate. Anybody else have an interest? And it's Heilman and Meister. Okay, almost done. Now we get to our own Committees, Finance and Budget historically has been the mayor and the mayor pro tem. That's Duran and D'Amico. Plummer Park last year was Meister and Horvath.
Happy to keep doing that, yeah.
Anybody else interested besides Meister and Horvath? Nope, Meister and Horvath it is. West Hollywood Park was Heilman and D'Amico.
I think we're going to continue doing that if there's no objection.
Anybody else have an interest? And it's Heilman and D'Amico and WeHo Park. Visit West Hollywood, or whatever the marketing bureau is called now, it's Heilman and Duran. I'm still interested unless somebody else has an interest. Heilman and Duran? Okay. All right. 1343 Laurel last year was myself and Councilmember Meister, unless anybody else has an interest. Anybody else have an interest? Then it's Meister and Duran. The Metro Council Subcommittee was Heilman and Horvath.
I'm happy to keep
And they
doing that.
both wish to continue, and that will remain the same. The Homelessness Subcommittee was Heilman and Meister.
Yeah.
Anybody else have an interest? And it will be Heilman and Meister. And finally, the CSW Pride Subcommittee was Duran and D'Amico.
I would like to continue.
And I'd like to continue as well.
Mayor, at our last meeting, we approved creation of a subcommittee to work with the chamber. So if we could appoint that, I
I
did.
don't recall us approving it. I recall it being raised, but I don't recall us approving it.
It also looks like it wasn't properly noticed, so we need to bring that back for another day.
I believe that if council wants to discuss it tonight and appoint someone, they can.
Okay. City attorney's not jumping out of his chair, so
The direction was to bring back an item for it, and it wasn't included in this item, so there could be discussion tonight. And I'll
All right.
confirm with our city attorney.
can we appoint 2 members of the Chamber Subcommittee, Mike?
Yes, I believe the item is written sufficiently broadly that you could do that.
Was that a yes? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
That was a lawyerly.
That was a lawyerly response, and I'm a lawyer, and I was confused. Okay, who wishes to serve on the
I'd like
chamber?
to have discussion about whether we need this committee and whether it's a good idea. I'm concerned because the chamber has a contract with us, as do a lot of other entities, a lot of social service entities, and I'm also concerned that the chamber endorses candidates. So that isn't really consistent with the other organizations where we have a liaison. So I'm a little bit concerned about what the need is for this and whether it's a wise idea for us to have 2 council members interacting and interfacing with the chamber in that way.
What does the body wish to do? You want to have a separate discussion, not tonight, but on another night?
Well, it sounds like that question should be answered by the city clerk and the city attorney, and they should come back with an item. I think we can wait 2 weeks.
Can we table this to July? We'll finish that. Okay.
Sure.
You heard the issues raised by Council Member Heilman. Let's see if we can get
Yeah,
it.
I mean,
Okay.
is the question whether the subcommittee was created? Because if it was created at the last meeting,
If I remember correctly, the direction was to bring back an item as part of this item to create a chamber subcommittee. That was the direction, to bring back, and that would be part of an item for discussion.
Okay,
So
so it sounds like it needs to be brought back, and it was not noticed as part of this item, so we'll bring it back for one more round of discussion and then possible appointment if we form one. Okay, all right, now we'll go to excluded consent. I believe the first was item 2V and then 2J. 2V is an agreement for services with Ramey and Associates to conduct a community study. I believe Councilmember Horvath pulled this for discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. It's not only the census information, although I think that would address some of what's brought forward here, but this contract that's coming to us is about $200,000, and I feel like even the report, item 2G, that was brought to us tonight identifies a lot of demonstrated need that we've seen with increased participation in some of our services. We understand some of the services that are not being as readily accessed. I think the information that this study is going to bring about can be found from existing resources, and I fear that this will be sort of a community exercise where not a lot of people will participate, so it actually won't achieve its stated outcome by broadly representing the community as a whole. So.
All right, thank you. It looks like we have no public speakers on this, but staff, do you wish to respond to some of the concerns raised by my colleague?
Good evening, Council. I'm David Juney, the manager of the Social Services Division, and I'm joined by Leslie Eisenberg, Social Services Program Administrator. And we also have the recommended sub-consultant, Richard Bernard with FM3. So first, I do want to address the the survey portion. The demographic questions, information is just a portion of that survey. The demographic, there was mentioned that we'll get some of that information from the census, which is a few years down the road. This project informs social services funding. The RFP will be released in less than a year. And it's also important because the demographic questions that we ask are different than the U.S. Census. It's especially important now with the erasure of the LGBT questions from the U.S. Census. We do ask those questions. So it is important that we have that information. In addition to demographic information, we ask information about quality of life. We ask information about needed services, priorities for social services. We also ask some questions about economic development, public safety. We do want to have, it's been 6 years since the last community study. This survey will be based, a lot of it, on the previous study, so we can get a true analysis over time, how priorities have shifted and changed. And that's just a portion of, there were concerns about the community engagement. This is an extensive plan that's been recommended with community meetings, stakeholder interviews, focus groups, pop-ups. We have a recommendation to do a gallery walk to get kind of more innovative ways of reaching the community. So it is pretty extensive what's been recommended.
All right, thank you. I'll make a motion to approve the item as presented. See if there's a second.
I have a
It's
question.
been moved and seconded. Now, Councilmember Meister.
How much is the quantitative part of this versus the rest of?
As far as...
In other words, the part that is the survey, how much of that is out of the total 199,909?
Approximately 52,000. And that's that's the portion that does the statistically valid survey. It does the convenience survey, which is basically taking the survey after we've completed that and putting that online. And then it also covers some of the focus groups.
Okay.
All right, any other council deliberation? Councilmember Heilman.
Well, I want to thank staff for bringing this forward. This is something that we have been doing for quite some time. It's pretty much how we determine the community's need for services and whether those needs have changed over time. I suspect that what we're going to discover is that many of the major service categories will remain the same. The community has changed in some ways, but not that significantly in terms of our social service needs. But the only way we're going to find that out is by asking the community and engaging the community. And, you know, to the extent that transparency is the buzzword tonight, this makes our process of identifying the priorities for social services funding, it makes that process somewhat transparent because everyone knows that the community has been surveyed. There are telephone surveys, in the past there's been a written survey, an online survey, there are community meetings to gather information. And I think it is important for us to make sure that our social services funding is based on that. I do appreciate the desire to use the census. Unfortunately, the timing here doesn't work, But in the past, when we've done this, we have relied on census information and have incorporated that into the service priorities and in assessing the service priorities. So I'm supportive of this. I think it's a necessity for us to have any integrity in terms of our funding process.
Thank you. Councilmember Horvath?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, it looks like there's support, so maybe if we can have some direction to do something different than we normally do by actively going out into the community, not expecting the community to come to us. I know that we're doing pop-ups and community meetings and we're creating opportunities that we think engage people, but for people who are living isolated, who can't leave their homes, some of those who are most vulnerable and need will not be reached by this survey. We're going to continue to survey the same small group of people when there's a broader audience that needs to be reached. So perhaps if we can incorporate some different tactics to reach some of those people, maybe going door to door and engaging like a street team or some sort to make sure that we're broadly reaching more people. So it's actually an effort that gets to those we're trying to reach.
Thank you. Councilmember Meister?
Yeah, I just would like to add that for the scope, I want to make sure that we have access to the crosstabs, because I know that was an issue the last time. And also, it might be helpful if staff looks at some of the other studies we've done where we've included questions of the community, like in the budget survey and the public safety survey and the mobility survey. We asked a lot of questions that weren't necessarily specifically about there are questions in the community study that overlap. So what I would suggest is that at least staff also look at those results and see if there are patterns, see if there is consistency, so that we're getting really the bigger picture. And I'm supportive.
All right. I believe it's been moved and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem D'Amico. All those in favor, please indicate with an aye. Motion passes 5-0. That leaves us to item 2J under pulled consent. I pulled this because it sounded like we were getting bogged down in some of the discussion. This is the West Hollywood Community Housing Corporation Annual Administrative Contract for fiscal year 2018-2019. Don't appear like there are any speakers, so I think we'll just move. Maybe staff can give us a quick executive summary report.
Sure. This is
Do we need it? Let me ask. I'm sorry, Peter. Does council member in? Okay. Peter, I'm going to cut you off just because it's getting late. Okay.
All right.
All right.
No, so just to clarify, looking at the scope of services, I just thought it would be beneficial, that we have in the scope of services that they're include, the engaging with regional agencies, for example, the West Side Cities COG. And when I was talking about a town hall meeting, what I meant was among their residents, among the housing residents, to give the residents of their buildings the opportunity to have open communication and to be able to be with other residents, and there might be issues that they all, that more than one person has, and this way there could be an open discussion about it. We have a new executive director, and it would be, I think, just a good start to have that included in the scope of services. And the training, as far as the development training, Councilmember Heilman says that's already happening. I think it's just a good idea to have that development training as we have with some of our social service providers.
All right. Did the city manager have any comment about this? Did you start to comment about this under city manager comments earlier tonight?
Yes, I did, and I think it was really just the last item in terms of the town hall meetings or the rental or the tenant meetings that we just needed some clarity on. So, Peter, if you have.
Sure, and I did have a chance to speak with Robin and with Carl Lott. Robin did want to stay, but she had a family emergency that came up. They are able to do a town hall meeting each year, so they could do that based on the direction that you've provided in your comments.
Great, thank you.
All right, that concludes all our councilmember deliberation and comment. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Horvath, seconded by D'Amico. All those in favor indicate with an aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. That moves us to legislation for the evening. Regulated shared on... Oh, does you all want to break or want to push through?
How many speakers do we have on this?
We have 3 speakers on this item, and okay, Councilmember Horvath already got up and left. Let's take 5 minutes. All right. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order. That was a quick 5-minute break. So last item for the evening, item 6A, regulating shared on-demand personal mobility devices, also known as scooters. Who is presenting from staff?
Hi, I'm Tara Worden. I'll be presenting this evening. Oh, great. Yes, okay. I'm an assistant planner with the Long Range Planning Team, and the item before you tonight is in regards to regulating the on-demand personal mobility devices, i.e. scooters or electronic scooters. The startup sector has, click ahead. The startup sector has given rise to new and emerging mobility options that operate on a shared economy model accessed through app-based technology. These new mobility options include dockless bikes and electric scooters. Cities nationwide are struggling right now figuring out how to craft policies to regulate these scooters. Can you just move that one inch closer? Yes. Okay. There are public safety concerns as riders tend to drive on and park on sidewalks and not wear helmets, but the scooters offer a convenient, eco-friendly, and low-cost transportation option. That's appealing to West Hollywood here, where we work to support solutions that improve mobility, quality of life, and environmental outcomes. So tonight, staff recommends that council do the following. 1, adopt the ordinance that would prohibit all unpermitted electric scooters and/or dockless bicycles, effectively banning all such devices as none of them are currently permitted. 2, direct staff to develop a pilot program with the Transportation Commission. And 3, direct staff to return to council and Transportation Commission with findings following the pilot program for further direction. The first staff recommendation would effectively prohibit these companies from operating in the public right-of-way without an agreement with the city. Currently, the municipal code does not explicitly prohibit the use of these devices. Additionally, the California Vehicle Code currently classifies electric scooters as motorized scooters, requiring the operator to be over the age of 16, have a valid driver license, ride with a helmet in the bicycle lane and not on the sidewalk, and to the right of the travel lane when no bicycle lane is present. Adopting the ordinance to ban the operations of these unpermitted devices would give code compliance the explicit authority to impound them, and this ban can be adopted separate from the additional staff recommendations presented here. Moving right along. So the second staff recommendation is to direct staff to develop a pilot program with the Transportation Commission. A pilot program represents a thoughtful, coordinated, and effective approach to ensure that West Hollywood strikes the right balance. The pilot would provide the framework to ensure that companies operating in the public right-of-way are doing so lawfully and are accountable for their products. This regulatory framework of the pilot program can dictate specific terms of operation, including restricted hours of operation, number of devices, and the location for daily fleet deployment. This pilot framework could provide us with valuable data to determine how to regulate this industry in a more permanent manner. Additionally, the City of Santa Monica recently approved a 16-month pilot program to test these regulations. The City of Los Angeles is currently considering a pilot program at this month's Transportation Committee meeting. And also, Culver City recently adopted an interim operating agreement with one scooter share company while staff drafts a more formal regulatory program. So staff brings this item before you tonight in preparation of the inevitable. So we cannot stop these scooters from coming to the city. As you may have already noticed, they're here. Therefore, we recommend council direct staff to develop a pilot program with the Transportation Commission to develop a creative way to regulate this emerging mobility trend. And finally, we would also further recommend that following the pilot program, we return to Transportation Commission as well as council for further direction in a more permanent way. And that concludes the presentation. We'll happily accept questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Warden. We have 4 speakers. I'd like to go to speakers unless council has any questions.
I have a quick question.
Councilmember Meister.
So if we approve this ordinance so that unpermitted shared on-demand personal mobility service is unlawful, what about people who just individually have either, a scooter that's not motorized or one that is motorized? Are those legal or not legal?
Those actually are legal. And if you're referring to people just dropping their scooters on the sidewalks, is that what we're referring to?
I'm just talking about someone who has their own scooter.
Yeah, those are perfectly
Oh,
allowed.
and so that is not included in this?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the public. Our first speaker is Manny Rodriguez, to be followed by Sam Dryman, Stephanie Harker, and Matt Dubin.
The companies that own on-demand personal scooters operate on the false premise that these devices are a legitimate mobility option, that they help the environment, offer last-mile transit, and reduce vehicular traffic. Those are complete fabrications with zero evidence to support their conclusions. On-demand scooters are used exclusively for recreation and as a joyride. No one is using them for real tasks. It defeats the purpose of a joyride for a scooter rider to follow the laws that protect pedestrians or themselves. For the last 10 months, it has been proven in other cities that these riders prefer to ride at full speed on the sidewalk and without a helmet. The dumping of these scooters anywhere and everywhere is also what makes this business plan so unique. Enforcement of existing state laws and local ordinances has proven to be impossible. We do not live in a movie studio back lot, a college campus, or an Amazon warehouse. We live in an environment with an active, busy, and vibrant pedestrian life. Scooters by design will undermine pedestrian safety and confidence in that environment, and they will obstruct and clutter the public right-of-way. Our city should not partner with companies that depend on our public space for their private commercial gain. Endorsing scooters through a pilot program or beyond would be a detriment to the West Hollywood pedestrian. I encourage you to deny a pilot program, show other cities that enough is enough, and move forward with our complete ban against this unsafe commercial intrusion on our public spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam Dryman, to be followed by Stephanie Harker.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Sam Dryman, and I'm here with Lime. We are a multimodal micro-mobility transportation solutions provider. We operate in 70-plus communities around the country, providing dock-free mobility options. Very excited to hear staff proposal to council on this item. It shows real forward thinking on helping your community achieve mobility goals, achieve first and last mile transportation solutions, achieve environmental and climate change goals. First, would like to say that we've actually conducted a survey of our riders in San Francisco and have in fact found that 65% of them would have taken an automobile, either a shared car or their own car, but instead they selected to ride scooters. So this is in fact reducing car trips, it's reducing emissions. One item that I would like to comment on in the proposal is the restricted cap. We see this as a severe limitation on the potential impact of this mobility option. If a company is only allowed to provide 50 scooters, that severely restricts users' ability to conveniently find and use it. It does not provide the opportunity to really impact how the expansion and success of it. We would also we also support the proposal to share data with the city to better inform yourselves and your staff on how to improve bike and mobility infrastructure in the city. With that, I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Dryman. If so, we'll call you back. All right, Stephanie Harker, to be followed by Matt Dubin.
Stephanie Harker, City West Hollywood. I think my main concerns about businesses of this type, while it's fun and everything, is the public safety issue. And I believe in the staff report, it said that they were going to include the Transportation Commission in on the discussions of this, but I feel strongly that the Public Safety Commission and maybe even a representative from the sheriff should be involved in this. I don't think I've ever seen a kid or a young adult on one of these, and I've seen many of them around wearing a helmet or any kind of protective gear. It's a motorized vehicle, and I think that they should, be having to follow all of the rules and laws of the road, just as a driver or a bicycle rider would have to. But we saw two kids the other day trying to ride two on one scooter and laughing and one falling off and things in the street. I don't really feel that the street's any place for them, again, because of the safety issues. And if we do go forward with this, with a pilot program, again, public safety is the most important, I think, for the people walking on sidewalks, because I saw a newscaster interviewing motorized scooters in Santa Monica over the weekend, and he said, you're not supposed to be riding on the sidewalk. And he said, oh, I didn't know. I guess I won't. But that puts children on, primarily children and young people, on these vehicles in the streets. Not a safe application of it, I don't think. But again, the safety issues and then the enforcement of those safety measures, laws and regulations, and certainly liability insurance that the children who are riding these should be required. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Dubin, Ben Baer, Victor Olmanchenko.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Matt Dubin, West Hollywood. I want to speak experientially because I operate a business and we have a location at 7th and Arizona in Santa Monica. And every day that I'm in that facility, I see parked outside on our lawn and whizzing by on the sidewalks these scooters. I know last week, I think on Tuesday, at the City of Santa Monica City Council, there was a 4-hour public hearing with a quite lively debate, and certainly more people than are here tonight. And that speaks to how many of those scooters are on the streets in Santa Monica and how polarizing this issue has been. So while I think it's a potentially intriguing mode of transportation, I think I would caution us certainly no more than 150, and really aggressive study and no permanent decisions made until after we do the pilot program 6 months, because it's really it's a real problem out there. So thank you.
Thank you. Ben Baer, Victor Olmanchenko.
Hi, Council. My name is Ben Baer. I'm VP of Policy at Spin. We're a stationless scooter company based up in the Bay Area. First of all, I also want to applaud the Council on passing this regulation tonight to enforce regulations on how these are brought into the public right-of-way. What we're seeing so far in San Francisco is that compared to our bike share markets, and we have more than 50 across the country, the scooters are about 10 to 20 times more popular. More than 30% of the trips are starting or ending at transit locations. There's people of all types that are riding them. It's not just tech bros. And this doesn't have to go the same way as ride sharing, where it's adversarial between the companies and the city governments. Our company, Spin, has a partnership promise to only work with cities when we have an existing permit, not launching before. And we're supportive of caps to enforce the number of vehicles that are on the streets, so that you can introduce these vehicles responsibly into the community and capture the transportation benefit that exists without the backlash that we think is really unnecessary if we work with the community to do things the right way up front. So again, happy to take any questions at the end, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Baer. Victor Olmanchenko is our final speaker.
Good evening again, Mayor and council members. Well, as a bicyclist, as an individual bicyclist, let me give you some experience that I experienced 5 hours in riding along the ocean, along our beautiful Pacific coastline, from here 11 miles to the Santa Monica Pier. Then I went north up to the Temescal Canyon where the bike lane ends. Then I made a U, had my nuts and ate a little bit, then went around, went back down to the pier, went all the way to Venice, and then came home on the bike path in Venice Boulevard. And let me say that a couple months ago, when a friend of mine and I were riding around, we saw the thing that bothered us the most about the electric scooters was the fact that they were being left in the bicycle lane. I've gone out in the path. I've gotten off my bike and I've had to like put them against a palm tree or sand, right there on the sand. What I've noticed, and the bike path has along the ocean both a dedicated bike share and then a pedestrian. And since then, since those couple of months have gone by, the scooters have proliferated. And somehow in those 5 hours out there on my bicycle, everybody was kind of like weaving in and out like you kind of see in movies that people are in China on their bikes or that, and people are walking around in that. So what I see happening here is that you're being asked to pass an amendment that would prohibit the use of these scooters unless there's an agreement, and unless you develop regulations, and unless there's a permitting process. So in terms of looking at mobility, at different options, I know Santa Monica has started looking at them. I mean, they've had a lot of publicity, a lot of people coming out and supporting this. I think any kind of technique that gets people kind of out of their cars is a good technique. But I really think that for our particular city here, our small city, it's different than the ocean side. It's different from Santa Monica and that, where they have more bicycle-type infrastructure. So I really encourage the 6-month pilot project. Let's see what comes out instead of summarily not allowing anything. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment on this item. Who wants to begin council member deliberation? Mayor Pro Tem.
I want to be 100% sure I understand the proposal. So is the idea to start this and begin reporting to the Transportation Commission for additional updates, or to schedule a Transportation Commission hearing and then hear from them and then develop a program and then get it happening?
I believe the intention is to work through the details of the pilot program with the Transportation Commission and launch it from their authority.
Okay, I don't know where this conversation will go with my colleagues, but I guess I think it's a fairly clear idea, and one of the things I would ask us to consider if we decide to move forward would be that we would schedule this as soon as possible and monthly for 6 months with the Transportation Commission, but that we, as soon as possible, allow the staff to identify a deployment plan and let it begin, because I could easily see that this could take 2/3 of the summer, and then the summer would be over, and then we still wouldn't have these deployed. And I think there's probably going to be some initial exuberance, and then we're going to see that everyone who had their chance to ride it once and thought, I'm so glad I didn't break my leg, and then never ride it again, and then the people who want to ride it consistently will do that. So that would be my first request. My second request would be that we, in terms of item 1, which is limit the pilot to 3 operators and number of devices, that we give some discretion to the Transportation Commission to increase the number of devices where it found that an area of the city needed more, and in order to accommodate that, there needed to be too few in another area of the city. Because I think we're going to have real-time data presented every 30 days, and I just think if this pilot program is going to work, we should stretch the the learning and do as much of it as we can. So I guess it's clear I'm in favor of this. I work in Westwood. There are any number of these devices all around. I also work in Santa Monica in Arizona and 16th, 15th, and it's just been my sense that after the initial exuberance, they became a regular non-problematic part of the urban landscape really quickly. And I've seen that they all appear to be in working order. They're never in a big clump. They don't end up sort of in parking spots where they shouldn't be, so cars aren't parking. And I walk around Westwood Village all the time and around Santa Monica regularly, and I would just point out one more thing, which is that people are riding these into West Hollywood already. And I'm definitely not interested in posting officers at the borders telling them you have to get off or what. I mean, I just think that's an unreasonable thing to ask. And it is probably true that this is not a first mile, last mile use here in West Hollywood because of the limited number of first mile, last mile needs. But I do think it is something, it is a service, it is some fun, it is something we can offer to people. And ringing in my head is like, why do they have to play that rock and roll music? Like, why are we letting them ride scooters? So I just sort of think like this is part of what's happening in our world, and I'm open to having this happen.
Councilmember Meister.
Thank you. I guess one question I meant to ask is, has this gone before the Transportation Commission to even recommend that we do a pilot?
Not yet.
Okay, so,
We will give them an update at their meeting this week on the discussion tonight.
but they're not going to, I mean, if we decide, then they're not deciding if there's going to be a pilot or not, right? I mean, that's
true. If the council were to approve a pilot, we would anticipate taking that to them in July, so they would be roped in quickly.
Okay, so my feeling is I'm supportive of the recommendation number one. I'm not supportive of the pilot program without it first being vetted through the Transportation Commission, meaning that they get to make a recommendation of whether or not we should even have a pilot program. I am concerned about 150 devices, and I do think that that's too many for a pilot program. So I would say that the way the recommendations are set now, I could support the first recommendation, but I think that the other two recommendations, unless it was to bring it to Transportation Commission to make the decision whether or not we have a pilot program, I can't be supportive. I think that people who ride in our city who have their own scooters, they're responsible. They have, they have the helmets, and they're just, but from what I've seen, people riding these in our city, they haven't been responsible, and they're not wearing helmets, and I've seen two people on a scooter, and I've seen them on sidewalks, and I've seen them, cutting off bicycles, whatever. So I think there's a public safety issue and that it's an issue that really Transportation Commission should have looked at first. Thank you.
Councilmember Heilman.
Thank you, and thank you to the people who came out and stayed to speak on this item. I first want to say I appreciate the gentleman from, I believe it was Spin, who indicated that their business model is that they don't operate until they have permits. But that isn't true for some of the other operators, and I think it's actually quite outrageous for a company to know that they don't have permits to do this, to show up in a city and drop a bunch of scooters off on sidewalks and know that they're not lawful and think that that's an appropriate way to gain the favor of the community to support these devices. I think that's just really a very bad business tactic, and it's actually influenced me to oppose this. I do support staff's recommendation that we should ban these devices. I don't support the idea of having a pilot project. Our sidewalks are pretty narrow. I've seen, while these have been operated, people not using this as first mile, last mile. They're using it primarily as a joyride, as something just to do for fun. They don't have helmets. They're not respectful to pedestrians on the sidewalk. Given the desire of the city to be a place for people to age in place, with a number of our residents having various mobility impairments, having these devices and having irresponsible people utilizing them on our sidewalks is not a good thing. And I hate to be the one against rock and roll and the killjoy tonight, but I really, number one, the way at least some of these companies operate, I cannot support. Secondly, I don't know that this really solves any of our transportation issues at all. People are not using this to get to a bus stop. They're using it to ride along Santa Monica where there's already buses. So they're not using it to get to public transportation. I don't see any real need for this in the community.
Councilmember Horvath, any discussion?
Thank you, Mayor.
May I ask a question of the staff? So when they did drop them off, it wasn't illegal, it was just something we didn't want to have happen. Is that right?
It was illegal, because the way the code's written, if it's not expressly permitted in the code, it's prohibited. And we just didn't have a written ordinance that I could point to and say, see right here in the code is you're not allowed to do this. It was a roundabout way, and thankfully it was just for a weekend, but it was not legal for them to do.
Can I ask a follow-up question? If I showed up on a weekend and plopped a vending machine on the sidewalk as my business model, because people are hungry on the sidewalk and they would buy things, would that have been legal?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Horvath.
Wow. So one of the recommendations that is in the staff report but not listed as a recommendation is to have an instructional video. And whatever we do, I think we definitely should create an instructional video. And if we need to allocate a budget to do so, I'm happy to have that conversation. I think the video should not be restricted to whether or not we do these scooters. But I think one for bikes and bike safety, I think would be, and how bikes and other things work with pedestrians. Making a video about all of that would be lovely. I think that maybe I think about this a little bit differently. I guess I think about transportation in two ways. We're in the business of providing certain forms of public transportation, whether it's dial-a-ride or, city line, things like that. And then there are transportation options that exist, but we're not necessarily in the business of. Skateboards, other things, segways. And so I guess I'm open to the conversation of a pilot program, while I also have very strong reservations about what that means based on this report. So maybe I get there if the questions are right. So in terms of sidewalk enforcement, how do we make sure that people are not, I have very strong feelings about anything being on sidewalks. So what is your approach to actual bike, scooter or otherwise enforcement on sidewalks?
We had that same conversation, Councilmember, with the companies that approached us and how they would help us regulate that. One of the things that we discussed is all of the scooters have numbers on them. If there's a scooter that's on the sidewalk, let's say, and somebody reported that scooter number, that a couple of the companies that we talked to said that they would help us, and then, because it's all application-based, so that individual that used it that day, in theory, could not use it again, or they'd be locked up for a period of time for not following some of the guidelines. So those are some of the things we were looking at, working with the companies on, so that they do help us promote the safe use of the scooters.
Second question. When we talked about bike share as part of that study, staff had indicated that one of the barriers to riding is an infrastructure deficit. So what makes this mode of transportation, which I think also includes dockless bikes, not just scooters, as part of this report, what makes this mode of transportation different and able to overcome those infrastructure hurdles that our existing bike share can't?
First, the proposal right now is not necessarily to include dockless bikes, but to do a scooter pilot program.
Only. Okay.
Although many of these companies operate both systems, so that could be a question. Regarding the bike infrastructure, yes, it's a huge challenge in the city. I think, as we heard from one of the speakers, the ridership on scooters tends to be higher generally than riderships on bikes. It may not stop people from riding them, but I think it would, if anything, increase pressure on us to implement bike infrastructure improvements faster.
You think
in order to provide alternative spaces for people to ride with increased safety.
Okay. So has there been any thought given to, I'm not convinced that the sidewalk enforcement piece is there. Has there been any sort of thought given to engaging the private sector or community members into how to make this a successful pilot program? And what I mean by that is something like requiring these companies to work with businesses to get their buy-in, so they have a space where these scooters can go, businesses that they partner with that work with the city to have them there, as opposed to the city being responsible for whether or not these are just kind of left discarded in the public right of way. I feel like if there's some other accountability mechanism that gives me more confidence that it can actually work, as opposed to the experience we have now, which is that they are just sort of left wherever, whether they come in here from other places or not.
I have a couple thoughts on that. One is that many of the operators use either individuals or local businesses to assist with charging and maintenance of the bicycles, or of the scooters, excuse me, not bicycles, and that all of the operators either disable or pull the scooters off of the street each night in order to charge and maintain them. So it's a limited operational period. They're not left out overnight. It is certainly possible for those operators to work with businesses to get some kind of agreement to park them on private property. I think it could be quite challenging, though, to maintain an operation. I'm not sure it's consistent with the operational model of the scooter companies to park them only on private property. I think we would likely still find that they were parked in the public right-of-way while they're in use.
Well, the idea being that if there was a business supportive of it, at least you could reach out to that business and say, hey, you're the supporter of this share of scooters, and then you actually have somebody who's accountable to them, because I don't know who these phantom scooter operator people are. I don't think they have an office in West Hollywood, and I don't think that they're going to have people on every corner. So I guess I'm just looking for who can be accountable for them.
Yeah, I think if we were to move forward with a pilot, we could certainly, include requirements that they have partnerships with local businesses and/or local operators, or a certain response time to issues, with local staff. They all have slightly different operational models. Some have their own staff. Some have independent contractors that work with them, and but we could certainly look into providing some of those regulations.
Okay, and my last concern is whether we think this will cut into ridership of our existing bike share program. If we're trying to replace that with this kind of model, what is the end game, and what is the relationship between what this pilot program would be doing with what we've already invested in?
I think we heard from one of the speakers, and we've certainly heard anecdotally from our peers in Santa Monica that when scooters are available, they are ridden more often than the bikes that are available. So I think it would be a reasonable assumption that this could decrease usage of the city's bike share system.
Okay, Mayor?
Okay, I'll offer my comments now. I do not support scooters in the city of West Hollywood, and I do not support a pilot program to study whether or not we should. I think that we currently have extreme competition on our sidewalks between outdoor eating cafes, lines and queues, dogs, pedestrians, bikes, and that adding scooters into the chaos, while we might get some decrease in car use or decrease in auto emissions, we will have, I believe, an increase in collisions. And I just think that we're not like Santa Monica or Malibu, which have miles and miles of coastline to play with. We have 1.9 square miles with very heavy competition between automobiles, pedestrians, bicyclists, animals, cafes, and we're highly dense. So I just don't think it's an appropriate use in such a highly dense urban area. And so my vote would be to vote no on scooters and no on a pilot program. So at this point, I think everybody's more or less chimed in on all. Why don't we start maybe with recommendation? Oh, Councilmember Heilman, do you have a motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve staff's recommendation number 1.
Is there a second to adopt number 1, which is a ban on the operations of making them unlawful citywide? It's been moved and seconded by Heilman and Meister. Any further discussion on item 1?
Yes, would you be
Yes.
willing to include the training video?
No.
Okay, so the motion is a complete ban on scooters. If you're in favor of a complete ban, vote yes. If you're opposed, vote no. Item passes 4-1, noting Mayor Pro Tem's no vote. Are there any other motions?
Yeah, I'll make a motion, but I don't have a way to make one. There we go. I'd like to make a motion. The motion that just passed was a ban on scooters that didn't have some sort of, I want to use the right language, and didn't have what? Agreement with the city. So I'd like to make a motion that we set up a pilot program. Item number 2, direct the Planning Development Services Code Compliance to work with Transportation Commission to develop a pilot permit program that would grant permits to electric mobility share operators to operate during a 6-month term of the program. And item 3, direct staff to return to the Transportation Commission and Council with the findings following the 6-month pilot program for further direction. And number 4 would be to schedule a regular Transportation Commission meeting for an update every month during the program to review the status.
All right. That's the motion. Is there a second to that motion? It's been moved and seconded. D'Amico and Horvath have further discussion. Any further deliberation or discussion before the vote? All those in favor indicate with an aye. All those with a no, no. Motion fails 1-4. Are there any other motions on this item? Hearing none.
I have a question though. So if I have to make a motion, I'll make it. But what do we do when people ride them into town? Are we creating another category of miscreant? Do we issue tickets to people riding them? Is that what we're doing?
Well, no, I mean, there's nothing that I'm aware of that would allow us to prevent somebody from coming from outside of the city on a scooter into our city. And from everything I found, the only thing that we can really do is require them when they dismount the scooters to leave them. It's okay to leave them on the sidewalk, but out of the direct path of travel. They might have to leave a clear space. That's in the vehicle code.
Why is it okay for them to leave it on the sidewalk?
I'm just saying what the vehicle code has listed.
So we're going to have scooters and we won't have a relationship with the businesses to pick them up when we want to call them. We're going to call us and say, we'll get to it when we get to it, because we don't have a relationship with them.
But I think we just passed a ban with that on the scooters if they don't have a relationship, if the businesses that are operating don't have a relationship with the city. So I guess why would we be allowing them? It seems like if they get left on our sidewalks, they would be cited.
Or anybody could pick it up and take it away.
Right.
Right. So the ban that was just passed is for against any company from coming in to place on the sidewalk or offer for rent in our city, any of these scooters or bikes or whatever shared mobility vehicle.
So once the customer drops it off, it is then available for rent, and it is in violation of our ordinance, and it can be seized.
That is correct. I think if it were reported to code that there was a scooter on the sidewalk, then code could maybe reply to that. But we wouldn't have necessarily like an API data entry point to say, oh, the scooters are in the city here, here, and there, wherein if a pilot program would permit such access to the data to track devices.
This doesn't prohibit persons from purchasing these and riding them on their own and leaving them on the sidewalk. Okay. Because I know people who have them, they ride them around. Okay.
Okay, there's nothing further on this item. Thank you, staff, for the presentation on this legislation. We now have one public speaker, Ty Geltmaker, I'm sorry.
Thanks, John. You got it right. Ivy didn't the first time around this evening, but I thought I should turn myself in because I am that Ty to whom she was referring. And with regard to that Stormy Daniels stunt, which I don't care to talk about anymore, I want to thank you, really, Mayor, because I think that was really noble, and I'm not heaping fake praise on you. I think that was very nice and humble and good, like a mensch, to tell Ivy that you went over the board. Also, I want to thank you again, because you run tight meetings, and so it's good to watch it on television, besides occasionally coming into the chambers. And I want to thank you also again this evening. I know this seems out of character for me, but your remarks regarding our child abduction program now in this country after Stephanie Harker's comments were very moving. And I know it seems haughty for me to say, oh, I'm a professor of modern European history, but it is true that my specialty is pre-fascism, not fascism. You don't know it yet. It's an insect on your back, and it's itching, 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 and then it's too late. So I just want to thank you, all of you, for I know what are your commitments to this human rights cause, because it really is scary, and we all agree on that, no matter what our disputes are about Robertson Lane and all of that. Thanks. I sent an email to all of you the other evening about Adolf Loos and Alva Riegel. I can't recommend those two early 20th century modernist Austrians enough, because I've learned a lot from them. I've taught a lot of students at CalArts from their writings about the value of historic preservation or getting rid of it when it doesn't deserve to be kept. So thank you. Good night. Buonanotte.
Thank you. Is there any other council member comment? Hearing none, we are adjourned to Monday, July the 9th. Happy 4th of July, everyone.